OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Yeah, 7:30 this Thursday morning, the 30th of April. Today is the last day of April. What a memorable month. What an amazing sporting month. April 2020 has been one that will go down in the history books forever for all of the desolation that was caused to the sports fixtures that we love. Anyway, no more of that today, apart from in the news. That's going to come up in a second. I'll tell you what's coming up in a very busy show for you. We're going to continue talking about the drug story in the GAA and just how the testing works, what the procedures are, how the education process works, ultimately where the responsibility for that education lands. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Michael Robinson with Graham Hunter and some of the other big stories that are coming from Spanish football. And we have a classic game club, which is, one of the greatest games in the history of Irish sport. It is Ireland against England in the 1990 World Cup, our first ever game in a World Cup. It has many things to recommend it. Don't listen to the naysayers, i.e. Owen Sheehan and Nathan Murphy, who would have you not watch this game. It is history. Sometimes history lessons, you have to endure them as opposed to always finding them to be a thing of beauty. But there's beauty in different, it's in the eye of the beholder, I think, as the cliche that I was groping for ultimately goes. Let me tell you what's in the news this morning. Tributes have been paid to the former Leeds United defender Trevor Cherry. He is the second member of the 1974 title-winning side to pass away inside the past fortnight. He made 486 appearances for Leeds, succeeding Billy Bremner as the captain in 1976. He made 27 appearances for England and was a member of their 1980 European Championship squad. Sligo Rovers say that the behind-closed-doors guidelines presented to clubs in the League of Ireland are cost-prohibitive. A 40-page document outlined how clubs may conduct games when football is allowed to resume in the country, but Sligo chairman Tommy Higgins has described the measures as impractical. He's also poured cold water on the idea of streaming games as a means of generating revenue. The GAA will offer season ticket holders a partial refund or a discount on their 2021 season tickets if the season is cancelled. The association did confirm that they had changed the terms and conditions on season tickets in the wake of the pandemic, but they say they did so to offer clarity and not to walk away from their responsibilities. In rugby, the French top 14 season is set to be cancelled today. French media reports that only Racing and Lyon still need convincing about drawing the season to an early close. On Tuesday, the French Prime Minister extended the ban on team sports until the 1st of September. Club presidents are set to meet with the French Sports Minister today with a final decision due afterwards. It'll be interesting to see whether or not they award a title and if there is relegation or exactly what they're going to do to come up with the various difficult scenarios that all of the sports leagues have when they put a pin in it, because ultimately, for sporting integrity, somebody needs to go up or go down, or nothing happens and the season is a complete write-off and there are no champions. Because if you don't have relegation and promotion, how can you actually have a team who are crowned champions? I guess this is exactly what the Premier League are grappling with at the moment. So here's what's coming up on the show this morning. Sports page is coming your way just after 8 o'clock. We're also going to be talking about the GAA scenes in Normal People, a frame-by-frame breakdown. Maybe the best football that we've seen from Kildare in, on TV, certainly since 2010. Is it that long? Mickey Quinn, the Longford footballer, is going to talk to us about dope testing and his experience in the AFL. Graham Hunter is going to join us to talk about the situation in Spain and look back on the broadcasting career in particular of Michael Robinson. And our classic game club, as I said, is Italia 90. The start of the waves of nostalgia for something that you didn't experience the first time around. Which, that's how life works. We're going to be back before 8 o'clock. But first, here are some Champions League memories from the legend that is John Hartson.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Hey, welcome back. So in our recent series, as Virgin Media TV customers, you can enjoy classic weekends of sport packed with some of the most memorable wins, losses, triumphs and upsets, all on Virgin Media Sport. We have invited several different people on to pick their favourite European football moment. We have had everybody from, last night, Stewie Byrne, who was talking about Shelburne against Deportivo. We have had Neil Mellor on, who gave that cushioned header for Gerrard against Olympiacos. We've had those guys on right through to the likes of Ken Doherty, who was in the new camp in '99 as a United fan, and even the economist David McWilliams was remembering Leeds and their semi-final run in 2001. So this evening, delighted to say, we have John Hartson with us. John, evening.
Good evening, chaps.
Great to have you with us. How are you finding things at the moment?
Things are okay. We got three little girls here at home with my wife, and they're doing a little bit of homework. Luckily, my missus is a former teacher, so she's really good with the laying out their little schoolwork and things like that. There's a trampoline in the garden, and listen, we're just like every other family, lads. We're a very humble family, and just trying to, adhere to what the government the rules that they've set out, and we're not really going anywhere. My wife goes shopping maybe once every 7 or 8 days, just up to the local shops to get the necessities. We've not really been anywhere other than that, like everybody else, really.
Well, we wish you well. The point of this slot is a bit of nostalgia. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with it at the moment. So we had two in particular that we picked out as big moments for you. We were talking maybe about getting Paul McGinley on. He's a Celtic fan, and he was talking about a favourite game when it came to Europe being the O'Neill Strachan eras, your eras as well. The match that stands out for me was probably Liverpool away in 02-03 when John Hartson scored a cracker to wrap up a 2-0 victory at Anfield on the way to the UEFA Cup final. So I'm going to build up to the new camp. We'll get to the new camp in the Champions League, but we start for a moment with Celtic against Liverpool in that UEFA Cup run in the quarter-final. I remember that was a huge thing. These kind of Battle of Britain games in Europe always had a bit of spice. That was a really good Celtic team. I'd say you probably felt a touch underappreciated when it came to south of the border football.
Well, yeah, 100%. I think Scottish football is snared down a little bit down south. I think it's very underappreciated because maybe, they've got all the big star names. I think down south they've got a lot more money in the in the Premier League and even in the Championship, some of the top end teams. But I do think they turn their nose up a lot at Scottish football, and in particular, Celtic's achievement that year. I think not only Liverpool, but we went to Blackburn and we played them off the park. Graham Souness's Blackburn, we won that game 2-0. We won the home game 1-0, so we beat Blackburn twice as well on that run. Graham Souness's quote was, "It was like men against boys" at Celtic Park in Blackburn's favour. So he did us a bit of favour because I know Martin O'Neill stuck that couple of them articles up on the wall at Ewood Park, and we didn't need any team talk that night. So, you talk about Liverpool, which was magnificent. We drew with them 1-1 in the quarter-final, and then we went down to Anfield the following Thursday night. And as you know yourself, lads, going to Anfield midweek in Europe is almost an impossible task. You looked at what they did last season against Barcelona, 3-0 down, had to score 4 goals and not concede. They managed to do it. Over the years, Liverpool, 5 European Cups, and it's almost impossible to win at Anfield under the lights in a midweek game, a European game midweek. So we managed to do that. It was a wonderful evening, great for the fans, great for the football club. And of course, as a lot of the Celtic fans would be listening in, we went all the way that year. I unfortunately missed the final through a back injury. I played 12 out of 13 games of that cup run, but unfortunately missed the final in Seville. We went down to Jose Mourinho's Porto. Henrik Larsson's got his 199th and 200th goals for the club that night. He got a brace. But unfortunately, it just wasn't enough, and we ended up losing the UEFA Cup final. Yeah,
I remember that game really well, and it was, the first kind of glimpse of what Mourinho was going to do in the game. Where did you watch the final? Were you just sat in the stand somewhere holding your back and disgusted at the whole thing?
Well, I knew I'd missed the final sort of 6 weeks before it actually happened, because I came off in a game at Ibrox. We won the game 2-1. We called it Beach Ball Sunday because we went to Boa Vista on a Thursday night a couple of weeks before, and in a game that we won 1-0, and that took us through to the final. So then on the following Sunday after the Thursday, the fans knew we were in the final, so they turned up with all these balloons and everything else and beach balls, and they kicked them all over Ibrox, and we won the game 2-1. And halfway through the second half, I scored the goal in that game as well, my 25th goal of the season. And I looked over at the bench, and my back went during that game, and I sort of signalled to the manager and the medical staff, I'm gone, I'm done. My back, I think I burst a disc. And I knew then, with about 4 or 5 games before the cup final in Seville, that I wouldn't play in the final. Just because anybody who suffered a burst disc in their back, they'll tell you that you've got no chance to recover within that, that small period of time. So I knew I'd missed the final, but I wanted to travel. So I watched the game. I went in the dressing rooms before the game with the lads. I walked out of the tunnel about 2 or 3 minutes after the players walked onto the pitch. And then I just took my seat just behind the dugout in the front row of the, there's a massive crowd. There's a magnificent stadium, is the Seville ground. And I watched it. I watched it in the ground. I was boiling hot. It was a ridiculously warm evening. And I was really disappointed with some of the actions of the Porto players and Jose Mourinho at that particular time. He was encouraging his players to stay down. They would dive in everywhere. Martin O'Neill was going mental on the touchline. So were all his coaching staff and the substitutions. But it was a terrible result for us. But I think it was a trip that the Celtic fans will never ever forget. Ideally, of course, we would have loved to have won. We give everything we had, but it would have been nice to have added a European, winners' trophy, give that to the supporters. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be.
No. I'll just remind people, by the way, before I move on to the Nou Camp, the Liverpool team that night that you beat 2-0 at Anfield. I like full of names that really would go on to win the Champions League a couple of years later. It's Dudek, it's Carragher and Hyypiä, it's Risa, it's Haman, it's Gerrard, it's Michael Owen, it's Heskey, it's Danny Murphy, Smeeser is there, Barros is there. So it's a serious Liverpool team that you go and beat 2-0. If I fast forward things then to Champions League territory, and this was really Celtic doing great things in the Champions League. Barcelona are in your group. They come to Celtic Park. They win 3-1 in September 2004. Henrik Larsson returns and scores. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that. Was that in 2004?
Yes, 2004, September.
Henrik left? Yeah, he obviously left by then, of course. I remember that game very well. Henrik scored the third goal. I think he lobbed the goalkeeper. It was a bad back pass. And he lobbed, I think I'd come off. I started the game and then Chris Sutton equalised, if I'm not mistaken. And Henrik, playing for Barcelona, lobbed the goalkeeper. It was a terrible back pass by one of our defenders. And immediately everybody's looking at Henrik, what type of reaction will we get from him? He was such an icon at Celtic. The goals and everything else that he gave the team. He was an unbelievable player. And he just walked back to the halfway line as if nothing had happened. He didn't celebrate at all. He hardly mustered a smile. Because obviously he still had a lot of affection for Celtic and the crowd at that time.
So that's a seriously good Barcelona team. That home leg was in September. The away leg then is 24th of November of 2004. Barcelona won, Celtic won. This is a Barcelona team with Valdez in goal. Puyol is there, Silvinho was there, Van Bronckhorst, Xavi was there, Deco was there. He was a really great player around that time.
Yeah. He was going to be one of the best players in the world at that time.
Yeah, he really was. He'd gone from Porto at that stage to that Barca team.
And he didn't quite hit the heights I didn't feel. Sorry for butting in here,
go on.
At that particular time, as what he went to at Chelsea, he wasn't the same. He was a shadow of the player when he went to Chelsea after Barcelona.
Yeah.
But at Barcelona, Porto before that, he was an unbelievable talent. He
was, yeah. Iniesta was in the squad as well. And then just to round things off, and this is 2004, so we're talking pretty close to their peak. You had Eto'o and you had Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho around that time, John, it's not talked about maybe because he didn't do it for quite a long enough period, but when he was at his best for those few seasons, Ronaldinho was pretty close to best in the world.
Yeah, he was right up there, of course, an unbelievable talent again, quick, powerful, a goal scorer, could make goals. He was, people used to love watching him play, he could turn really sharply. Just a genius on the ball. But I've got to say, not many people know this, but Martin O'Neill had year pointed Jos Valhaeren that night to man mark Ronaldinho.
Right.
And Ronaldinho didn't get a kick.
Right.
Valhaeren was unbelievable. Martin said, look, if he goes to the toilet, you have to follow him in the toilets. Get that close to him. And he probably produced one or two little bits, but not enough to affect the game. And that was mainly through the Belgian centre-half that we had, Jos Valhaeren. He did a fantastic job on him that night, I have to say.
There was some kid called Messi on the bench as well. I don't know what happened to him, but he was beginning to hang around. So we were talking yesterday with an Irish player who had played over in Deportivo. That was his favourite moment. And I mentioned to him, Alex Ferguson always talked about loving Spanish football nights, Champions League. There's a smell of, he would say, cigars and perfume in the air. What was the Nou Camp like in 2004? You know, the steps that come up from underground onto the stadium. Give us a sense of what that's like. I know you've played in great stadiums and big games before, but that must be right up there.
Well, again, you know, as a footballer, you're pretty much in the zone. You get used to playing at big stadiums. You get used to playing in front of big crowds. And as a Celtic number 10 centre forward, and as my country's number 9, you know, when you're centre forward for club and country, you tend to not take it in. If I went there now as a fan, I'd be thinking back, wow, I can't believe I played here and this was unbelievable. But at that particular time, you cannot let yourself get dragged into the crowd and the noise and the atmosphere, because you've got a job to do. You're pretty much focused, you know, in the job in hand. But as I said, it's a bowl of a stadium. The one thing I remember vaguely is the supporters being so far away at Barcelona, so high up. They're right in the far corner, like on the third or fourth tier in the away end. And Celtic always travelled, you know, immensely with numbers, thousands. I remember Blackburn away. The away end was, there must have been 7,000 or 8,000 fans in the stadium, and another 7,000 or 8,000 fans outside the stadium had all travelled down to Blackburn for that away, you know, second leg in the UEFA Cup. But it's no doubt for me, it's arguably one of the best stadiums on the planet. You know, the Nou Camp. Everybody talks about the Nou Camp. I wasn't fortunate ever to play against Real Madrid in any competition, so I never got to play at the Bernabeu. But no, as I said, you know, maybe like a lot of things during my career, I never sort of soaked it up enough. And I say to players now, I say, look, appreciate everything, take everything on board that you're doing, because your career generally comes and goes. You know, some players have successful careers, they win trophies, they win individual medals, they play with other great players, and other players don't quite get as high as a level to play in these great stadiums. But for me personally, you know, I managed to play with great teams, with great players, and European football. You know, I managed to taste a little bit of European football with Arsenal, you know, in the final of the Cup Winners' Cup, the Parc de France. And, you know, I think I played 3 or 4 times at the San Siro, one for Wales, Celtic. I played there for Arsenal in the Super Cup final, second leg. You know, and Barcelona, again, was a wonderful stadium. But at that particular time, if I'm being, you know, brutally honest, it's another game. It's another game in a magnificent stadium with a great atmosphere. But I never really took it all in.
And do you think, I guess,
with my son, and I'd be like, wow, look at this, Johnny. This is unbelievable. Your dad played here once. So you can reminisce a little bit. You know? Yeah,
no, absolutely. And scored. We're talking about a 1-1 draw away to Barcelona. So it was a great night. The interesting question is, do you think if you had allowed yourself take it in a little bit more, I'm not saying daydream during the game, but I'm talking about the warm-up, I'm talking about the bus ride, I'm talking about looking around a little bit. Do you think if you had allowed yourself take things in a bit more, enjoy the enormity of it a little bit more, you wouldn't have played as well, you wouldn't have been able to perform as well? Because I'm not so sure you couldn't do both.
Yeah, no, I think you make a fair point. You know, I think you make a good point, but I'm not gonna, sit here and say, while the ball is coming into me, while I've got to get across Puyol and Marquez and knock the ball down for Chris Sutton, because obviously Henrik wasn't playing that night, and I've got Stan Petrov and Paul Lambert rolling the ball into me, I'm not thinking how beautiful this stadium is.
No, that's true.
How good Ronaldinho is, and there's Messi there on the bench. I can't allow myself to think that way.
Sure.
If I'm doing that, I'll be dragged off. I won't be. But I know what you're saying.
I guess it's more like the warm-up, taking a minute to appreciate it in the warm-up, maybe, that kind of a thing.
Listen, I might have done that in the warm-up. I may well have looked around and realised, the fans were sort of packing into the ground, and I don't know, I think it was 94,000, I think the crowd was that night. I might be wrong, it might be but there was a huge crowd there. And again, if you pinched yourself and said, wow, there's 84,000 people here tonight watching this game, and God knows how many people watching it at home on the television screens and everything else, on Sky or whatever channels it was on. You just allow yourself to take your mind off things. But there's no doubt, for a couple of seconds, you're taking it in the warm-up and stuff. Of course you are.
Okay.
But I wasn't gonna allow myself to get too drifted away with the atmosphere, if I'm being honest.
No, that's very understandable. To sum it up then, so we've touched on that UEFA Cup run, and there's Celtic fans texting in, remembering it very fondly and thinking, God, wouldn't it be lovely to have something like that now? If you take that UEFA Cup run and the results, like at Anfield, like away at Barcelona, aside from very decent players, which is clear and necessary, that Celtic team had a bit of something about them, and O'Neill at that stage, Martin O'Neill, seemed to be really a man, and Strachan as well to a point. They could get big performances out of that team.
We had good players. I think the game is about good players. Yes, manager puts in a bit of structure, and the manager, your feelings for the manager makes you try that little bit harder. The way the manager is to you as an individual, as a human being, tactically, the way that he can make changes during the game to change the game, but also, you need good players. Yeah. You look at United, you look at the defenders they've had over the years, the midfield players, the strikers, the goalkeepers. They're good players, and we had good players. We had Stilian Petrov, who had 100 caps for Bulgaria. One of the greatest Bulgarians, was fantastic on the ball, great balance, could play, could score a goal. We had a European Cup winner in the lineup in Paul Lambert. We had a Golden Boot winner in Chris Sutton. Gone to Chelsea for 10 million, won the Premier League. Defensively, we were very strong. We had pace with the gap down the right, and we had a bit of guile with Alan Thompson down the left, who had a wand as a left foot. We had really good Henrik Larsson and myself, who scored goals at Arsenal and West Ham and played for my country, So we had good players, and Martin sort of assembled a good team. And I've got to be honest, that the team didn't change much. The team, if you won, and in particular a striker, if you scored or made a goal, then we didn't change. And I think if I had any gripe with any, not so much a gripe, but I wonder sometimes why managers have to have such a huge squad. Because footballers want to play. They don't want to rest. I could have played Saturday, Wednesday, and I've got a big game Saturday. I don't want to come out of the team unless, of course, I'm injured. You do very little training during these periods. All you do is a 5-a-side, massages. You check over upstairs. There was a private gym there if you wanted to go and do some weights or just, do some extra sort of things, some sit-ups and just tune, self-tune, if you like, your body and things like this. So
but you're in a rhythm.
Yeah, go in the ice bath. So people tend to want two players now, don't they? The top teams tend to want two players for every position. We couldn't have that luxury, And one thing I'm trying to say is that players want to play. Believe me, if you're a player and you're a top player, you don't want to rest. You really don't want to rest. If you're a centre forward, you want to get your goals up. You want to get your numbers up. If you're a midfielder, you've got no interest in resting. Defenders love clean sheets. They love heading the ball. Defenders, they love defending properly, and getting the better of their opposite centre forwards. But, as I said, going back to that team and the team that Martin assembled, we had some winners in there as well, some men, some real men. I think our youngest player was Stilian Petrov, around about 25, 26 years of age.
Okay.
I was 30, Lenny was 30, Sutton 30, Lambert, Valharan, Johan Mjällby, another Swedish international, a brilliant player, could play centre-half or midfield. Thompson, again, all 30 plus. So you had a team of men. You had a team of men going out there as well.
Yeah. Well, listen, 1-1 away to Barcelona. That's definitely a very nice entry in the series. John, thanks a million. Stay safe.
All right, boys, anytime. All the best.
See you now. John Hartson there. And that was the latest Champions League memory. We should be talking about Champions League game. Obviously, that's kind of the hook for this. And it'll be back on Virgin Media Sport, I'm sure, very soon. In the meantime, they are airing over 10 hours of classic games each weekend to celebrate some of those amazing moments in sport. We'll take a short ad break. Wednesday night rugby is on the way after 8.
Off the ball on News Talk. OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB's Mount Rushmore. 32 counties. One county representative choosing their sporting Mount Rushmore. Some decisions are easy.
And I was seeing teachers who had never expressed any emotion whatsoever lose their mind when Sonny was running in that home straight, trying to catch that gold spot.
Others are controversial.
Mayo's greatest celebrity fan now helps him earn his place on Mayo's Mount Rushmore is Kevin Kilbane.
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off the Ball.
George O'Connor, 17 summers in purple and gold.
And catch the live decision making over the next few months on OTB AM, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
OTB AM.
And a very good morning to you. If you've just joined us, you've missed a great interview with John Hartson where he's been talking with Joe about his favourite Champions League memories. Barcelona featured heavily, and Nights at Anfield featured heavily. Great series that the lads are doing on the football show in association with Virgin Media. It's just coming up to 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 30th of April. Oh, and can you believe it? This is the final day of April. What a month we've had. What an amazing month of sporting triumph, tragedy, great games, loads of stuff to look back on. How's it been for you, buddy?
Like you're talking like a pure elite GAA fan, because of course it's been the club month, hasn't it? So you've actually watched no GAA.
Hey, shots fired. Look, it's a very busy programme for us this morning. We're going to be talking about one of the greatest moments in Irish sports history, our debut on the world stage in the World Cup. A country that was, 70 years old at that stage. And we took our first fledgling steps blinking into the light. And from a distance of 30 years, you're going to pour scorn and shit on that team who represented us because you're like a post-ironic, post-history hipster.
Not at all.
Yes.
I will pour scorn on the game and a little bit on the style of football, but not on that team. How can you possibly pour scorn on that Irish team from Italia 90? I mean, people came out in their droves to welcome them home after getting into the top 8 of that tournament. So how can you possibly come back and actually be poisonous about that team? It's just about the game, Ger. We're looking back at Ireland against England from 1990.
One of their greatest achievements. One of their greatest achievements, and you're poo-pooing it from the distance of quarantine. No. Show us your medals.
I'm absolutely poo-pooing the actual game itself, Ireland against England. And there are a number of mitigating factors. There was thunder and lightning in Cagliari that night. There was terrible conditions, a gust of wind. It was like Gibraltar minus the fly playing in the background. That's what Cagliari was like in 1990 when Ireland drew with England. So there are excusable factors, but it doesn't mean that we are going to excuse the spectacle that we decided to watch this week. Nobody forced us to do it, which is the most frustrating thing about this. We voluntarily said, yeah, let's do that game because nostalgia.
It's an important moment in history. Like as I will say later on, and as I will repeat now, sometimes when you are forced to undergo a history lesson, you have to broaden your mind and tune into the nuances of the time and look for the little nuggets of treasure that you will take with you that will last a lifetime in terms of memories.
We found nuggets of treasure. We found Mick McCarthy being the Rory Delap of his era, and we found amazing Eamon Dunphy, we are regurgitating the amazing Eamon Dunphy archive footage as well. So there are nuggets around this game. There just isn't too many in the game.
This is a slice of history almost as good as something that I was going to say that Paul Rice might produce on Off the Ball, but it's not. It really isn't. It's a different type of history lesson where Statler and Waldorf, aka you and Nathan, are like, this is rubbish, and I'm like, no, come on, everybody, just pay attention to the good stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's coming your way after 9 o'clock tonight, Ireland versus England. You can watch that game Friday night. I would recommend if you're going to watch the game on Friday night that you have a few beers beforehand, a bit of pre-drinking going on, as opposed to like just drinking during the match, so that you method act what it was like to watch the game in the first place, and
ease the pain.
Exactly.
Come to the product drunk.
But that's not the only TV that we've been watching over the last few days.
Nice segue.
A massive explosion, a global explosion of the sport of Gaelic football. Unfortunately, there is no Gaelic football for people to watch when they go hunting for this now afterwards. So I guess they're going to find stuff on YouTube. But I'm talking about Normal People, which on Hulu has exploded in the States. Washington Post have given it a very favourable review. There's been lots of very positive talk about it in England as well, because it's being shown on BBC. And what they're discovering is that Gaelic football is an important part of the narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, not inadvertently, this is actually going to turn out to be one of the best things for Irish tourism this year, because I don't think we quite appreciate just what a genius Lenny Abrahamson is and how good this television show is. Like, it's very easy for us in sport to appreciate the world-class people who have come out of Ireland, in terms of the Roy Keanes, for example, when we talk about it in our Mount Rushmores. But I don't think I think in a way Lenny Abrahamson is actually underrated, and all you got to do is listen to anybody from outside of Ireland talk about this television show and how much they want quarantine to end so that they can actually come to this country. And a step further than that is that it will be a lot of people's first introduction to Gaelic football, and it's pretty good. Like, it's fairly clear that Mescal, the main actor, has played a bit of GAA, and it's pretty clear as well that the choreographing of the GAA scene in episode 1 is fairly off to a T, from the wardrobe to the I would say that the hand passing skills, the kick passing skills, to the classy finish at the end of the scene. It's all wrapped up beautifully, and like, I haven't seen too many international breakdowns of GAA, but I'm sure it's piqued the attention of some people.
So, I mean, you say he's good at football, like Kildare under 21. What are you talking about? This guy's a sensational footballer. The block was the thing that inspired a conversation yesterday. Somebody had asked us to rate this, and I was like, well, it doesn't really matter what we think of it, because Marianne, who's in the crowd, who's watching Connell play football, is pretty excited. It emerges later on. She is pretty excited by what she sees, as she tells him when they're getting into it for the very first time. And so how we view it, not really that important. But actually, it was as good as you've ever seen in terms of Gaelic football being done. One, the block was good. There was a pattern of play that didn't look like a bunch of players in one jersey's running one direction and a bunch of players running in the other direction. So there was like a cinema verite element to this. It looked like a match that they were legitimately playing. The quality of the hand pass looked like, oh, okay, that guy actually, it was like not just a training drill. It was like over somebody's head. It went straight to the chest. It was like, this guy can play a bit of ball. And he drops his shoulder and off he goes. Bang, back of the net.
Well, yeah, well, I think that there's a bit more to it as well. I think that people around the world need to realise that what they're actually watching is reincarnation of Declan O'Sullivan on the small screen. So he's a wing forward. He's wearing his chain under the Intersport jersey, very secondary school, trying to impress everybody in the stands, but he can do it. He's got the talent to be able to do it. As you say, the give and go technique, absolutely textbook half forward, and they're 2 points down at this point. It is 113 to 111, the scoreline. Gives and goes, gets it back. The wing back chasing him. He manages to keep pace, sure, but he just can't get a hand in. I'm not sure, is he afraid of the greatness of Connell here, or is just in awe of what he is doing, perhaps in awe of the fact that he's actually wearing a chain while playing Gaelic football. Just can't catch him. He races away from the defence, back at the net with the right foot. The goalkeeper, statuesque, kind of takes a step back as it goes past the umpire, who looks like Larry David, cuts to the scoreboard, 211 to 113. They've won the game. And then there's a nice ad for O'Brien Sports, the one-stop sports shop as well, on the scoreboard. It's got it all. It's perfect. It's a great win for St Kilda's, beating their arch rivals Naomh Mahu.
Sensational. And after we were asked to review this, I was like, oh, definitely the best thing that we've ever seen. Malky Clerkin chimed in with, yeah, it was. The block was absolutely sensational. And then went on to say, but hang on a second, the goalkeeper actually not that good. Really, that's the one part of this and he made the point on Twitter that it looked like it had the bang of a goalkeeper who had saved the shot the first time round and been told, here, listen, this has to go in. This is the winning score. Don't do it again. And Lenny Abramson, the joy of Twitter is he's like, actually, that's exactly what happened. He made a stunning save, down low to his right. Couldn't believe he saved it. And so the second take is obviously the one that we see where he's not allowed to save it and he's huffing a little bit, going, well, come on. I mean, I would have saved it. Which is stunning.
It's a good story for Paul Mescal to be able to tell in years to come, because he's definitely going to become the most worldwide famous Kildare under-21. No offence to any other Kildare under-21s. Like, this guy's going to become an A-lister around the world. His career is skyrocketing as we speak. He is exploding. And that goalkeeper could have been the one to stop it all for Paul Mescal, but Lenny obviously stopped in and was like, no. We've got a global superstar here. He has to score the goal.
There's a lot of thirst out there for Paul Mescal on all the social media feeds.
I was listening to a Ringer podcast yesterday, and one of the pundits said this guy is on a Brad Pitt trajectory. There is a lot of hype, not just in Ireland, for this
right,
season.
Okay, which Ringer podcast was it?
It's called... It's called TV Concierge. It's just like a quick 10-minute podcast.
Okay.
They just do a quick recommendation.
I was wondering if it was like Steve Kerr and
no,
Pete
it wasn't Steve Kerr or Pete Carroll, no. But I'm sure that's the next step.
Okay. So, not to bring this all back to OTB AM, but how great does his career have to be before, in 5 years' time, we're going, look, I understand that Ruby Walsh had a great career and it's very difficult to take him off Mount Rushmore, but seriously, Paul Mescal, this is, look at what he's done for the county of Kildare.
Well, it's for the county of Sligo, really. Unfortunately, this television show is going to be great for Dublin, as it is going to be great for Sligo. And that chipper that they go into in episode 2 will be flocked with people once lockdown ends. They're bypassing Kildare. Paul Mescal hasn't even done a good thing for Kildare. You're probably going to be the only person who remembered. He played for Kildare years down the line. Sligo and Dublin will be laughing in your... And of course, other Kildare people. But
Exhibit A, Larry Tompkins. Kildare's Larry Tompkins. And Exhibit B, Shay Fahy, that we still bang on about 30 years later. Like, just wouldn't have one of those if it wasn't for us at all. Right. Porrick Dillon wants to know, hi lads, just wondering what show, movie you're talking about. Sounds very interesting.
Well done for establishing that at the top of the show, Ger. We're talking about normal people. It's on RTÉ Player. That's the legal way to get it. But you only have to get 2 episodes a week.
Yeah, if you have the BBC Player, you can watch the whole thing. If anybody can hook me up with how to get the BBC Player in Ireland, I'd be much obliged. Does anybody know how to do this? No, blank stares. You know how to do it?
I play by the book, Ger. Play by the book. I still use. I still watch DVDs only.
Oh, and the point of being able to patronise me in situations like this is that you're supposed to take them.
It's called a VPN. I'll explain it to you.
But how do I put a VPN on my TV? That's I've got to.
They need to just invent some software where you can actually cast stuff from your laptop to your television. That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
I can cast it from my phone. I find it difficult to cast it from my laptop because it doesn't work. It doesn't get picked up on the TV. I have to plug it in. Like it's a HDMI cable. Look, it's a HDMI cable.
You need to get yourself a Chromecast or an Apple TV, one or the other, and then you'll be able to VPN all you want on your television. Of course, we don't recommend that. I'm not even sure. Is it properly illegal? Probably is.
No, it's not. It's totally fine.
No?
I mean,
is it? Okay.
Hey,
right.
look. Why shouldn't we be able to leech off the BBC? All the stuff that country has done to our country over 800 years, the least we can do is to be able to stream normal people when we want to, right?
Well,
that's a fair trade-off, isn't it?
In all seriousness, like
six counties for the BBC.
I completely agree. Like the BBC iPlayer being geo-blocked is a stain on our relationship with Britain. I thought we'd move past this sort of begrudgery, and barriers are being broken down during coronavirus, figuratively, because they're actually literally being put up in a practical sense. But figuratively, paywalls have been broken down and free things have been given out. The geo-block on the BBC iPlayer, I cannot believe it's still standing during these challenging times. Drop the paywall, BBC. Let us watch this GAA star in full flight for 10 episodes, please.
Unite our country, BBC. This is your opportunity to take a giant step forward in our relationships in these islands. Unite our country. Release the geo-block. You've started a campaign. I like it.
Like, if this doesn't happen, we will have to rewatch reruns of Jason Statham beating the shit out of guys with a hurley. That is the only GAA content we really have in worldwide cinema. And if I have to rewatch that anymore, I might lose my mind. So please, just give us this.
Given how important the plot point has been so far, do you think there might be more games, or is one enough? Is this?
No, they're going to Trinity. They're absolutely that would be it's
there
an Irish
is GAA
author
in Trinity. Wash your mouth out. There is GAA in Trinity. I'm telling you.
It's an Irish author. It's an Irish director. They realise that there is no GAA in Trinity. If it was an American production, and they were like, right, the person goes to Dublin and they get better at Gaelic football, then we'd know that it wasn't authentic. Sally Rooney and Lenny Abrahamson both know that GAA does not exist within those four walls. So sorry to break it to you, but it's one and done in terms of Paul Mescal's GAA on-screen career.
0879 180 180 is the number to WhatsApp us, and if anybody finds any sign of intelligent life around GAA in Trinity, then let Eoin know, because some of us are aware of the fact of its existence. Dating all the way back to 1995, actually, was the first time that it ever happened. Talking about classic game club, Phil Egan says, I was in the Jacks when Sheedy scored against England, so I was sent to the toilet when we were 1-0 down to the Dutch, and it worked again, but I had nothing left for the Italy game. Nathan Murphy says, I watched back the Republic of Ireland versus England for the Classic Game Club. It turned out to be the toughest 90 minutes of lockdown so far. This is a gross exaggeration. And look, here's the thing. Maybe you don't want to watch the game, but you got to listen to this, because this is actually a bit more entertaining than the game, I promise you. So here's what's coming up on the show this morning. John Hartson, we've obviously had sports pages coming your way right now. We're going to talk about drug testing within the GAA and how it might compare or contrast with the AFL. Obviously a very different situation with the AFL being professional, but Mickey Quinn has experience of both of those, and he'll join us around about 8:30 this morning. Graham Hunter coming your way at around about 10 to 9. I talked to him about the career of Michael Robinson and some of the other news that's coming from Spain at the moment in terms of their Project Restart or the equivalent. And then Classic Game Club, as we've been telling you about, is all Italia 90 based. England and Ireland, a 1-1 draw. Gary Lineker shitting on the pitch. Who doesn't want to hear us talk for 10 minutes about that incident? I mean, I think that this is the content that you pay so much for when you sign up to Off the Ball. Right, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
We are indeed going to start with offtheball.com, and the lead story this morning is that the former Leeds defender Trevor Cherry has died, aged 72. No doubt that'll come up on Thursday Night Football with John Giles on the radio this evening. Stephen O'Brien, Buckley's Kerry exit, finishing leagues, playing with no crowd. Stephen O'Brien did a bit of media yesterday, so we talked to him about Donny Buckley and what it might be like finishing the leagues, hopefully at some point in 2020 with no crowd. And then Anthony Davis, who was the independent judicial officer in charge of the Cronin case, was on the show last night for a good half hour, getting into the nitty-gritty of the details of that case and also how these cases work generally. So if that is in your wheelhouse, then a very educational piece last night as well. And then German officials to present official plan for Bundesliga return is the story there. And again, Niall Moynihan was on talking about doping in the GAA. Ultimately, the buck has to stop with the player. It's true But certainly there is questions being raised about the efficiency of the education programme and who actually ends up with responsibility for running that education programme. And I'm sure that's going to become a topic of conversation over the next few days, as finally Sport Ireland will confirm that a GAA player has been banned for 4 years, and then you'll see statements from the GAA, and I think this will be a topic of conversation over the coming weeks and days. What have you got for us on?
The Irish Independent this morning leads with a photograph of Mia Whelan O'Connor from the ESB Swimming Club practicing her craft in her back garden in Inchicore using an inflatable pool. There could have been an idea for you, Ger, for your swim for a mile. Top 2 united on FAI's plans to explore closed doors options. Meanwhile, this is Vinnie Perth and Stephen Bradley, both happy that the idea behind closed doors football is being considered. They are obviously quite cautious about it and the practicality of making it happen. And then the GPA says players will not be allowed to put themselves at risk. They've been out yesterday saying that a return to play needs to be fully safe for their players to actually take to the pitch. A couple of other stories then from the Independent this morning. Neil Francis, they might call the tune, but sponsors don't always get it right. Banner's prodigal son Cunningham back on the beat, and Cheltenham should not have taken place, admits HRI chief.
And that's the lead story on the Irish Times as well. So Brian Kavanagh had done an interview with the Sport for Business podcast hosted by Rob Hartnett, and he was saying, look, it should have happened behind closed doors and maybe shouldn't have happened at all. So that's Brian Kavanagh of Horse Racing Ireland saying that. And then O'Brien backs drug testing regime for players. This is the Stephen O'Brien story. Pitch perfect as Croke Park gets a little rest and recuperation. Plans for resurfacing could be put on hold due to lack of action. So I think the pitch gets resurfaced on a semi-regular basis after every couple of years, and maybe they don't need to do it as quickly as they would have done otherwise. There may be no further matches this year at GPA, so that's one of the takeaways from the GPA, who had a communication yesterday with all the players. It's our view that this current period should be used as downtime with a break from inter-county commitments. Feedback from squad indicates that a lot of management teams are taking this approach, and we welcome this move. We'll continue to give updates as the situation develops. There are no answers as of yet, but when we have further clarity, we will provide it. There remains the genuine possibility that we will not see any return to action this year. However, we hope the situation will change in the coming months, but public health advice will be the guiding principle. That's that story there. And so there's definitely a row brewing between the leagues and FIFA and their chief medical officer, which we'll get to with a brilliant headline in one of the papers there. Restart of leagues definitely possible, says Meyer. So this is UEFA's chief medical official, Tim Meyer, saying clubs can plan the restart of competitions, which is a little bit different from what FIFA was saying yesterday.
The London Times this morning leads with the story that doping chiefs finally get Farah's data. So this has been a bit of a tug of war between UK Athletics and UK anti-doping. Details about Mo Farah's medical data, which was not fully shared between the organisations previously, has finally now been shared. Of course, there was a big push to get this after the Salazar ban last September, and the data wasn't forthcoming. Of course, there's no suggestion that there's been any wrongdoing by Farah, but there has, of course, been a bit of difficulty getting that data. So they will begin to analyse that. Mourinho's special delivery is the main photograph on the back of the London Times. He's carrying fresh food from the club's kitchen garden at their training ground to the local community. And police back neutral venue restart plan. The Premier League should give serious consideration to completing the season at neutral venues to minimise the impact on emergency services. So that would be, I presume, due to the fact that not a lot of fans would just rock on up to the ground and cause a ruckus and avoid social distancing if the games were to take place in their own back garden.
The Irish Examiner this morning, a couple of different angles from them. Train for your well-being rather than a far-off championship, players told. And then the Stephen O'Brien story that they've gone for is players are used to closed-door games, and he makes the point that most of the challenge matches that we've played over the last number of years have been behind closed doors in pitches around the country. So when you think about it, that makes perfect sense. A lot of controversy behind those games, sometimes when players end up in hospital having battered the heads off each other. And but at least they're used to it, so it's not going to be this completely alien concept. No, it won't. And I think Peter Keane was making the same point over the course of the weekend as well, that the training games are ferocious. They take place behind closed doors. That's the way it is. Like, are we really going to just postpone an entire year, cancel an entire year because the atmosphere is different? No, we're not. The reason to do it is for public health, but like, you know, even listening to Sam McConkey yesterday, he expects there to be at some point down the line, new information came to light. You know, the dude and Sam McConkey together at last. Everybody needed that. I just think that there's a chance for us not to make decisions now that in 4 months' time we're like, well, actually, we could have played 8 rounds of championship, got something done. We could have started it this year. We could have had a fair few club matches done. We could have had club league happening at the same time as the intercounty championship, and then played club championship immediately after that. Like, there's definitely there's scenario planning that you hope is happening at the moment too. So,
but are we going to make the most of the GAA taking its first tentative steps back to social distancing training? Like, should there be a GAA version of horse organised, where like obviously in the NBA they managed to do it from people's back gardens? When people are back in social distancing, could there be some sort of five-a-side skill challenge organised between counties as some sort of tiebreaker? Could you play off the first round of the championship with a remote and social distanced skill challenge, I wonder?
Could you have the Morris Fitz sideline challenge, where like there's an age grouped, so the 20 to 25 sideline challenge, you couldn't you? This would actually be decent.
And Morris Fitz himself could probably take part.
Well, that's why, I mean, ultimately he's going to win it. You put the Masters against the kids, and there's a final in Croker. They do it over 5 days. I mean, look, you know, we're scrabbling around here for something, but maybe we've discovered something on.
It's we should have had this conversation off air and sold it. Sean O'Shea would win that competition. Wasn't there someone else recently who regular? Clifford did it. In fairness, he did it in a different video, and that was actually from the corner, literally the corner flag, which is actually tougher. But Sean O'Shea had done it in a couple of games. But there was obviously another player from a different county recently. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. Was it Shane Walsh, maybe?
I think Shane Walsh in my head as well. I would have said that. I mean, I could be wrong, but
he did it in game, of course. Like, I mean, I'm sure Dean Rock would knock one of those over as well. From the right side, it was from the left, wasn't it, in the drawn game last year? The thing is, the Morris Fitz thing, the level has over the last 23 years has obviously got to such a high standard that you'd almost have to see, can you do Morris Fitz 3 times in a row, for example,
to equal Morris Fitz?
Yeah, like I think that it's much more in the range. For example, people are more powerful nowadays, so the range is definitely there. Yeah, it's easier nowadays, isn't it? Like, I think it's just the GAA has gone to a different level.
Yeah, it has. Of course, it has. All sorts of things have improved. So what's next?
The London Independent this morning, fighting talk is the main headline here, with a photograph there of Josh Warrington, who's opened up on his rivalry with Shakur Stevenson. Moeen lends backing to postpone 100. Meanwhile, he's endorsed postponing the 100 this year, reasoning that England and Wales's cricket board's flagship competition is too important to be diluted, and FIFA explore restart options, writes Miguel Delaney. England's September Nations League games away to Iceland and Denmark are almost certain to be postponed. So that, of course, goes for Ireland as well in terms of our Nations League fixtures.
The Herald have a 2-page spread about Wayne McCullough. Wayne's death duel left fans relieved at final bell. This is, I think, it's part of their series of, Dublin's greatest sporting occasions. Number 7, McCullough versus Bueno, 1996. So Wayne McCullough's face is swollen really badly at the end of this fight. It's a fight he wins, and apparently he remembered almost nothing of the fight the next day. I'm pretty sure he broke a cheekbone in it. That's why, certainly there was nerve damage in the face, if memory serves correctly. But they absolutely killed each other in the ring, metaphorically, and his blood pressure was dangerously high. His eardrum was burst. The doctor said his body was in shock, and so that was the last time he boxed at bantamweight. So making the weight was obviously a big issue for him, and he kept his world title. But it was one of those victories that you kind of feel like ultimately, I don't know, Wayne McCullough goes on to fight again and again and again, and be in some very high-profile fights after that. So it wasn't so much a turning point in his career as the end of his career at that weight. But that's certainly worth digging into. It's in the Herald today.
The Mirror this morning goes with Gary Neville's comments. Your money or your life. Neville, restarting the season now is all about economics. But how many players have to die before the idea becomes unpalatable? So that's his tone on restarting football. BAME stars, meanwhile, they face extra risk in rush to finish campaign, writes Darren Lewis, who's touched on the ethnicity of a lot of patients being treated in intensive care, which is, again, another angle which I hadn't really seen on this. Tune offer Pochettino £19 million a year. Newcastle's prospective new owners are ready to make Maurizio Pochettino the world's third highest paid boss with a whopping £19 million per year deal. Incredible figure it's being thrown around there. And GPA says no games until there's absolutely no risk to players.
The back page of the Irish Sun this morning, kicking the ballots. 800 out-of-contract players to vote if they'll play beyond June. So, and they've got the picture of Mourinho in the garden as well. It's funny there was a photographer there, isn't it? At the same time that Jose happened to be picking up some vegetable for veg for people who need it. It's fairly lucky for him that this photograph got out there, isn't it? I mean,
well, in fairness, it's you give a little, you take a little, and there was obviously conveniently a photographer there when he was flouting social distancing rules a couple of weeks back. So, if there's going to be a photographer there when you're at your worst, then there should be a photographer there when you're at your best.
Could Jose Mourinho have a Keeping Up with the Kardashians style TV show?
Yes, absolutely. Great shout. What's his entourage like?
He definitely is somebody who is good on TV. Like, every time you watch him, you're like, oh, that's Mourinho on TV, I'm going to watch this. Even when it's a 13-minute monologue answer to one Jeff Shreve's question, you're like, this is kind of getting boring now, but like, it's Mourinho and I can't turn off. It's a bit car crash. Ooh, he said something, and, the 12th minute in, you're like, oh, that justified me. This wasn't one of those 70-second videos on Twitter that I'm like, why did I watch that full 70 seconds? Give me my time back. So the fate of the Football League season could hinge on a key vote by players about whether they work beyond their contract dates. So this is obviously the lower league in the EFL. And, it's a very difficult scenario here because Players' Union have confirmed that there is only severance money on offer and no extra wages. And so therefore players will not agree until they're actually offered money to play. Well, the league teams are asking them to play for free after their time runs out, which all of a sudden means that the team that started the season and the team that finished the season are going to be completely different. So UEFA furious over Belgium's waffle. See what they did there? European League's boss Lars Christer Olsen slammed Belgian Michel Doug for insisting the season must be cancelled. So Doug's the FIFA medical officer, and he said the football should not return before September, even behind closed doors. But Olsen has told him to shut up, while UEFA's own medical professor said restarting the season is definitely possible. So a little bit of a fissure there.
Right. If he obviously kind of agrees with what he's saying, then the headline tomorrow has to be the Doug abides.
Hey, yeah, I'll take that. Well done. Next.
The Irish Daily Star, I thought you were going on. The Irish Daily Star this morning is €22 million per year. Saudis plan to lure Poch with world's third highest salary for a manager. HRI chief says Cheltenham should have been behind closed doors, while GAA insists refund always on the cards. So this is a story we mentioned yesterday. GAA chiefs insisting they've always intended to offer a refund to 2020 season ticket holders if this year's league and championship is not completed. So season ticket holders were yesterday sent an email which said, I clearly don't check my emails, which said either a refund on the 2020 ticket or a discount on next year's ticket would be available if the league or championship are not played off, which is fair enough, obviously. And Gary says cash only block. Gary Neville has claimed only money is preventing the cancellation of English football this season.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. Loads of people will lose their jobs if they cancel the season, and that industry might never restart. Some of those clubs might just disappear if that happens. Like, this is a point Miguel made last week on, or was it on Monday, on the show, that there's it looks like it's just greed, but actually it isn't. It isn't just greed. It's like a massive industry that supports loads of other ancillary industries. Yeah, and so if we can save those livelihoods, we're staring down the barrel of a depression. Like, none of us have lived through a depression, and depressions have massive repercussions. Like, the last time there was a depression, it was kind of the beginnings of a giant global conflict. So we're trying to avoid that in any way that we possibly can. And if football has some role in saving 20,000 jobs or 30,000 jobs or 100,000 jobs across England and beyond, then shouldn't they try and do that?
100%. If there is an ability to save an industry here, and all the employees that go with football clubs, for example, without question, like it isn't just to do with that. There is also the more grey area. We can't put a number on how many people's enjoyment of day-to-day life would actually be improved by having football to watch or football to look forward to at the weekend, or like it is the centre point for a lot of people's lives, and that is certainly the case in the UK as well. Like, if the option is there to do it and it is safe to do so, there's no question that they should be trying to press on with some form of a return to play. And as you said, the most important thing is that their jobs will be lost, and jobs are already being affected at the moment.
Which won't come back, that's the thing. So the Telegraph, a lot of interesting stories here. United Health warning over big return. That's huge uncertainty around season amidst Woodward, Old Trafford clear to test safe standing for 1,500 fans. So safe standing has been something that they've been talking about for a long time, but now actually might make far more sense. Rip out the seats. You might be able to have a sizable amount of people being able to go to grounds and to social distance at the same time. So the RNA's plans to allow amateur golfers to play next month. This is a James Corrigan story, which I think is in line with the public health advice that we've been hearing from Luke O'Neill and Sam McConkey on the programme. End season if fans gather at grounds for matches, say police. So this would be the scenario that we saw before, when fans were outside the ground and you could hear them. They were so loud. There were obviously so many of them. You could hear them on the TV broadcast. It was, I think, Paris Saint-Germain game in particular. And the UK police are saying that you'd have to end the season if that was happening. I mean, yeah, I think that's a fairly straightforward thing. Threatening to end the season seems like, well, couldn't it be policed? Isn't there a way to police this and to stop people from dispersed from congregating, water cannons, rather than end the season? But anyway. And then the other one is experts call for grassroots to lead the resumption of sport, which I think is kind of how the conversation has gone here about putting club matches back before you put the inter-county matches back. So all of that seems to make sense.
The Guardian, finally, for me this morning, leads with this interview by Donald McRae done with Andy Cole. Some days are a total blur, he says, legend Cole, on his depression in self-isolation. It's a fairly harrowing read. So 18 months ago, McRae also interviewed Cole, and he described the psychological and physical aftermath of his kidney transplant in searing detail. His battle has now been intensified by COVID-19, to say the least. Just a couple of lines from Cole in this, that the past 5 years have been a shitstorm. When I met you in October 2018, the biggest shitstorm was just starting. It certainly got worse. It certainly did. He says, I'm still here. That's the most important things. But he says, there are many, many times when I just want to give up, period. Not just on life, but give up on everything. It becomes so difficult. I was struggling last Wednesday. It totally came out of the blue, and I had to stay in bed. I conceded defeat and accepted that today's not going to be my day. Previously, I would fight, but ultimately, I know I can't beat it. So that's great stuff with Andy Cole there this morning by Donald McRae in The Guardian. And then you've also got that cricket story about the 100 and Moeen Ali. And then also a couple of other stories mentioned on the back page. Cheltenham Festival should probably not have taken place, says top executive. And Project Restart analysis, is the Premier League's project really viable, asks the football writers in The Guardian.
That Andy Cole interview is really good. He talks about after his kidney transplant, looking at his own body and hating it, and then going to meetings and realising that was a fairly common response from people who have transplants. So if you get a chance to dig that out today, then you should. Just to tell you about some of the quick stories that are happening around the sports world at the moment. The Gaelic Players Association say that the health and safety of their members won't be risked as they come to terms with the new realities, and the organisation's chief executive Paul Flynn has acknowledged there is a genuine possibility there will be no return to action in 2020. Kerry footballer Stephen O'Brien is open to the prospect of playing matches behind closed doors if the environment allows.
Like, from a player's perspective, once the ball's thrown in, you don't really it doesn't bother you too much. Now, I don't know, is it feasible to play games behind closed doors? I mean, look, it's gonna, for the people that can't go to the match to see it in person, it's gonna be a huge thing. So as a player, I'd be okay with it, but I don't know, is it feasible?
Government producing a clear roadmap in terms of how businesses are going to emerge from this lockdown.
Sligo Rovers say the behind closed doors guidelines presented to clubs are cost prohibitive. A 40-page document outlined how clubs may conduct games when football is allowed to resume in the country. The Sligo chairman Tommy Higgins has described the measures as impractical. Higgins has also apparently poured cold water on Niall Quinn's idea of streaming games as a means of generating revenue. But Dan McDonald has Vinnie Perth saying that these ideas need to be explored and we shouldn't be knocking them on the head just yet. In rugby, the French top 14 season is set to be cancelled today. French media reports that only Racing and Lyon still need convincing about drawing the season to an early close on Tuesday. The French Prime Minister extended the ban on team sports until the 1st of September, and club presidents are set to meet with the French Sports Minister today with a final decision due afterwards. A quick reminder about our OTB Kids Takeover. This is where we hand over the airwaves to the children of Ireland and set them loose on some of our biggest sporting stars. The first one we did was Brian O'Driscoll, then we had Lee Keegan, and this week we have Simon Zebo. To leave a question for Simon, make it as outrageous as you possibly can. 087 918 180 is the number. Send us a message, a voice note. Better still, do it on video and shoot the video in landscape mode. So turn it around sideways and we'll put the questions to him. Mickey Quinn is up next. First though, here is Niall Moyna talking about drug testing in the GAA. Have a look.
Yeah, and I mean, the GAA, for the most part, is mirroring what's happening in society. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, supplements, and it's, for the most part, unregulated, and that's one of the big issues. You know, the bottom line is, I mean, I've sat on the, and I currently do still sit on the Medical Scientific Welfare Committee. And January, February, March, April meeting every year, we spend a half hour going through how many counties, you know, have done the education, how many players have we have because it's supposed to be completed by the 31st of May. So there's workshops, they can go online and do it. And what more can the GAA do? You know, now I think county secretaries are overworked, and to be fair to Paul Flynn and the GPA, they're pushing this very hard as well. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's an amateur sport, and we don't have the resources to go taking a blood sample or to investigate every single player on every team to find out what they're eating 24/7. At some stage, the buck has to stop with the individual player. And I think that individual players are probably making decisions. I think 90% are taking supplements thinking, now I'm taking this because, you know, it'll be good for me and I hear other people are taking it. And there's probably a small percentage are saying, look, I'm going to try and find something that's going to give me the edge. And I'm not going to discuss it with any member of the backroom team. There's nothing. I mean, really, what can a backroom team do there? All you can do is your best. We don't have the resources to be doing, random blood checks on our amateur players. So it's a difficult one. And to be fair to the GAA, from the moment the Sport Ireland initiate the whole drug policy, the GAA totally bought into it. And you know, 3 yes is too many. And I think if the word gets out there, it's lax. Before you know it, it's 5, it's 10, it's 15. And I think with the current regime that's out there, I think we're doing pretty good. Would we like to see 0? Yes, we would.
That's Professor Niall Moyna talking about the story that has kind of been the big GAA story over the last 24, 48 hours or so. Mickey Quinn is with us. Mickey, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Morning, Ger. Good, thank you.
You have experience in the AFL as well. We thought it might be interesting to chat to you about kind of the differences between what it was like being in a professional environment and how aware everybody is in that environment of contaminated supplements, what the regime is actually like, and then what it's like now. And maybe we might tease out some of the other issues around this in a couple of minutes' time. But first, what was the experience like in the AFL?
Yeah, it's probably something that you're in an environment that people are very aware of, and you've got medical team behind you that are very aware of everything that's going on and in the know. And I suppose with that, those people around you and educating you, and you guys coming onto a squad yearly, like there's systems and procedures put in place to cater for that. I suppose that's one of the difficulties with the GAA, that there's such a huge turnover from year to year on a squad with players, let alone management and backroom team and everything else, and that causes its difficulties in its own self.
Well, now that you brought that up, we should actually talk about that, and we can go back to the AFL in a minute, because if I look at the various scenarios and the individuals who have tested positive in the GAA, there's a common theme. It's a very small sample size, right? It is a very small sample size, but certainly in 2 of the cases, these were players who were fringe members of the panel, and talking to people in the background about who actually ultimately has responsibility for the education process, there's a bit of debate about it. So when do you actually become a member of the GPA? You're a GPA rep, am I right?
Yeah, I'm GPA rep for Longford. Like all the services and things that are available to players are available from once you become a member or join up to a squad. So if there's a new member that joined the Longford squad this year and they wanted to avail of different services from the GPA, they're able to use them. Officially, they're not a member until they're a part of the championship squad or panel, but that's more so to do with different funding and grants and stuff like that for the next year.
And the funding and grants is actually fundamentally important here, because I was just doing a bit of research on this over the last 24 hours or so, and there was a big row between Sport Ireland and the GPA about providing home addresses, and I'm not going to relitigate that at all, but the point of, there was an addendum published, and it's there on the internet for everybody to see, that grants are only available to players who have done the drug testing. I presume it's an online course, like it's a half-hour course. So you're only able to get the grant if you've done the online course, and you only become a full member, and so therefore the GPA only become aware of you when you become part of the championship panel. So if you're not officially a part of the championship panel, the GPA don't know you exist. So how are they going to tell you have to do this drug testing?
That's the difficulty, and that's where probably looking at and sitting down and thinking about it there last night, that, you know, as a player rep, the GPA will pass on information to myself or whoever the reps are, and our responsibility then is to pass on that information to the playing squad, whether that be forwarding on WhatsApp messages, emails, or face-to-face, just informing lads of different things that might be going on, whether it be anti-doping or different bits and pieces, or the services that are available to players. And you can see from what you're after mentioned, Ger, like there's a lot of difficulties with the way things are set up. I think the deadline at the moment is end of March for that anti-doping education to be completed. There's two ways of doing it. It can be done online to the GAA portal, learning portal. It can be completed that way, but usually it's individual or squad visits. So someone from the GAA educational side of things on anti-doping will come out to a squad before or after training, sit down and have that half-hour, 40-minute conversation, or I think it could be up in an hour, with squads and get it done. And that proves difficult when the league starts up and gets running, that, we're looking to get an hour before or after training. Lads are training 5 times a week and trying to squeeze something like that in. Whereas with so many new guys coming onto a panel in November, December, maybe that's something that needs to be looked at, to try and get that education thing done as soon as that. It's almost like a prerequisite for player members that to have it done at the beginning of the season rather than letting it drag on. But I suppose with open panels with players walking in and walking out of different squads, that becomes difficult too, that if it's done early in the year and then someone misses out. So there's a lot of difficulties that you wouldn't imagine in a professional environment.
This is particularly most pronounced in the squads that don't have very defined panels, where, so in the Dublin panel, for example, if you are on the fringes of that, you've been on the fringes of it for a while, you haven't come from nowhere, you've come through the under-21 system, or you've been a club player that they had an eye on and they've brought you in, but that panel is very well set. Like big training matches, it condenses back down. For other counties, I presume, and just looking at the amount of players, like, so we did a piece, Arthur did a piece at the start of the year about 80 or 90 different players walking away from inter-county panels. The turnover on the Longford panel from when you joined to today must be absolutely phenomenal. And so there must be 10 or 12 players who are joining every year and leaving and going at different stages of the year.
Yeah, I think we counted up last year, there's 12 people hadn't rejoined the panel last year. And then you've new guys coming back into a panel as well. So, I think this is where probably we're trying to figure out, is it the GAA, the GPA, or where the buck stops? And like the GPA have been running rookie camps for the last number of years, where new guys onto panels are rookies in the first and second year. There's a rookie camp organised in November, I think it was this year, where you can nominate a number of players to go to the rookie camp, and at that camp there's different workshops on different areas, and one of the workshops this year was, or I think it's on a regular basis, is anti-doping. So they have someone from the Irish Anti-Doping Association there giving a talk and informing players. But as the amateur ethos of the GAA and held to professional standards for players causes that difficulty. And I think with players so close to the fitness industry at the moment, there's so many people that think they know everything about it, but when players are held to such a high standard, getting that information and education out to players is the difficulty.
I think there's a real tension here, and everybody says that they're fully signed up to and they want a clean sport, and that is true. Everybody wants a clean sport, and nobody wants to think that there's one team who has an advantage over another. And at the same time, there is a bit of a tension between a kid who gets called up to an inter-county panel, who's essentially a club player, or a club player who has a good season and gets called into an inter-county panel, and the first day that they're training, they're then held to the same standards as athletes in any sport globally. So they're signing up to the same anti-doping code that the London Marathon runners have, the elite London Marathon runners have, or that the US Postal Cycling Team would have had back in the day. Like you go from playing club football for an intermediate team in Kildare, you have a good season, and 2 weeks later you're on an inter-county panel, and straight away you're liable to be tested, even though you haven't yet had the education process and you don't, because it's your first exposure to it. Or if you're an 18-year-old who comes from a minor team and within the first 3 or 4 weeks of training you're getting tested, there are people who are going to say that's fair enough to use it as a barrier to anybody thinking about doping. But then what if you took something 5-6 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago that's still in your system, you get popped, and all of a sudden you're held to the same standards as world-renowned athletes who are making millions in endorsements? There is a tension there, isn't there?
Definitely, and that's the difficult side of things, that the GAA and the GPA, that you're trying to look at and trying to limit 3 players in the last, I'm not sure how many years those 3 tests have been positive, but it's still a small percentage, as Niall Moyne has said, but still something that they're working with to try and prevent those cases cropping up. You're saying how long certain things stay in the system. I'm probably lucky enough that I'm naive to the fact that I've been in the system for so long, and I'm wary of it and educated, and you kind of take that for granted. I suppose when, as a player rep with new players coming into the squad, and when pre-season starts again, first thing you're thinking of just turning up the training and getting fitter and doing what you normally do. But then you have that added responsibility of, making sure players are up to date and educated on different things like this. And I suppose that's where player liaison officers have been put in place to try and help with squads and different things like this. So, there's loads of steps being done and taken, and eventually the book does stop with the player, and it's their responsibility. And if that was the key message that was put across at the very beginning, which is that players are responsible. We're lucky enough in Longford that we have an amazing doctor and nutritionist with us the last number of years, and if you have any problems, very approachable. I suppose it's when players veer off that line and try and do things their own way that the difficulties arise.
Mickey, does that doctor get approached often with questions around anti-doping? Because we had Eamon McGee on yesterday, and he kind of pointed to the fact that you could play an entire inter-county football career and not get tested at all. That sometimes it almost might be a situation where you almost need to get tested to come to the doctor with the question, and education happens via that process.
Yeah, I haven't been tested here. I have been in Australia. I've been 9 seasons here, but of that, I think I've seen 2 tests. This year has been 1 with our county. Look at it. I think there's an awful lot. Maybe new players to the panel aren't going to go out of their way to find a doctor to ask questions. You try and make it as easy to approach a doctor or ask questions as possible. But I suppose new players onto a panel are going to be coy, and it's not really going to be the first thing that they're going to be doing is making sure everything's asking a doctor if they're taking Lemsip or taking this, is it okay? And I suppose that's probably, I've been very cagey with everything from my experience. You're wary of taking anti-inflammatories, or if you're taking a Lemsip or something like that, that you might just text the doctor and ask if is it okay. And that's probably from my education in the GAA and in the AFL as well. But new guys to a squad mightn't have that same education.
Could you talk us through the difference, Mickey, between what you've seen here and what you've seen in Australia when it comes to testing and anti-doping?
I probably haven't seen a whole pile here in comparison to Australia. I know one of the differences is hair testing in ASADA or Australia, that hair testing has been brought in, and that's more so to track long periods of time. So I think with up to 3 months can check if recreational or illicit drugs have been taken, and that was brought in a few years ago. But there's blood tests, urine tests and hair tests there, whereas it's the last number of years it's just blood and urine in the GAA. So that's one of the key things. I suppose probably it's a different environment where a number of testers come in, maybe 5 or 6 in Australia will come in to a training ground after a training session, and they're there. You come in, get your recovery done, and the players have been randomly picked, and you're assigned a tester, and the tester will go around with you for the next half hour to 2 hours until they get the test. I think they have to wait after strenuous activity to wait a half an hour before testing you. And making sure that you're not rehydrating, that the sample is good enough to take. So that could go on for an hour or two. So testers could be there for up to 3-4 hours, filling in paperwork and bits and pieces. Similarly enough here, there's testing in competition and in training. I probably haven't seen enough of it here to know much, but from talking to other lads, it's very similar. I suppose the difficulty it causes is that you're an amateur in the sense that, after training, or you're after rocking up to training yourself after a day's work and finish training at maybe 10 o'clock at night, and you're trying to maybe travel back to Longford and trying to wait to get a sample done. But usually they try and do it, get there early and get it done before training if possible.
You said that there was testing. There was testing this year. Was the first time you'd seen it? Sorry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there was testing this year with Longford. You saw some tests happen this year. Is that right?
Yeah, we were tested this year. This is the first I would have seen this year. Yeah.
And how many people are tested when that happens?
Off the top of my head, it could be up to 4 guys.
Okay. And do the testers come with names already of who they want to test, or do they go, I'll pick you and you look pretty big? How does that work?
I think it's randomised as far as I know. I'm nearly sure that's the way it works, randomised. And from there, I think probably the other side of things is the availability to testing, or that the county secretary has to inform the anti-doping agency of where training is, what time it is on a regular basis, and update that. And that creates its own difficulties too, that, we've probably had training changed a couple of hours before a training session or a training venue changed. And that's a side of things that has came up for issue or discussion with ourselves.
That's interesting, because obviously, pitches get closed or whatever, and or gates are locked in some instances. There's been a row somewhere along the way, and suddenly one venue is not available and another one is, and you can see how that would happen. But that actual process and knowing where training is, that was kind of part of the conversation that was happening a couple of years ago, when that row did break out between Sport Ireland and the GPA. As a player, how do you feel about the fact that your home address is something you have to give up to get your grant?
Yeah, look, it's probably something that I probably wouldn't have put a whole pile of thought into it. Like if you're holding yourself to that standard, and it is something that you have to do. I suppose there's home testing, it hasn't came in, but like it's a big area for the GAA, and I think that is the difficulty that, and it's causing a lot of problems, is, you know, the GAA is, that amateur ethos is held in so high regard, and it's part of the game and part of our culture, that it's one of the selling points to it. But when these kind of things creep up, it's trying to find what's the balance and what works best for the GAA and for the player. And that's where a lot of these issues are that you're trying to swing the balance and find somewhere in the middle that works for both.
Of course, yeah. The other thing I just wanted to ask you about briefly was the supplement culture, and you know, this is a conversation that kind of we could have at any time, independent of the recent positive test. That ESRI report from a couple of years ago essentially said that loads of players, particularly I think they talked about the Nicky Rackard Cup, and there was a bunch of players at that level who were taking supplements that they'd bought on the internet, and a load of others were taking supplements that they hadn't run past the team management. Now I can see how you would buy something on the internet that is completely reputable, but I can also see how, you know, you're like on shopping and this one looks good and you click it and it arrives and you take it, and actually you will be glowing for weeks and weeks because you've no clue what's in it. It hasn't been batch tested. What is the supplement culture actually like? Are there official supplements that you guys get from a medical practitioner who's involved with the team, who says this is on the list of stuff that you're allowed to take? If you're going to take anything else, lads, tell me about it? Or how does that work?
Yeah, pretty much. We have a nutritionist, and at the start of the year, it's just emphasised the importance of nutrition and having a good healthy diet, and the supplements are, you know, such a small percentage on top of things. You know, if it's something simple like omegas or a vitamin D, that's the height of it, or some creatine, and what's provided or what information is passed on from the nutritionist. That's probably one of the key things at the beginning, that no need to be worrying about all those 1% and 1%ers or 0.1%. Your nutrition is such a big percentage. Get that right first, and that's emphasised from the beginning. I think probably the big thing at the moment is the crossover from the fitness industry into the GAA, or, you know, everyone's a fitness coach now, or everyone is able to give a nutrition plan and know what they should and shouldn't be taking. And that in itself causes difficulty, that if you're in the wrong circles and you're listening to the wrong advice, you know, if you're going to a gym and such, there's a rep there from a company that tells you, oh, this is brilliant, you play this, you should be taking this. Whereas at the end of the day, that rep is just a salesman for his own product and looking for commission. So I think that's the way it is, that that fitness industry has got so big, and, you know, players can get caught up, wrapped up in that industry sooner than the GAA side of things, that, you know, the supplements that you are allowed to take and what you should and shouldn't be taking can become watered down.
That does seem to be certainly a huge issue. We know that steroids are a massive issue in gyms. We know as well that in the off-season, players are going into these gyms and they're looking around and they're looking at players they're looking at people getting bigger and bigger, and they're having conversations. Like that's kind of the nature of this. Like as a competitor, you want to feel that the playing pitch is fairly level. Is that your instinct as a competitor at the moment, or do you feel that there are definitely people who are getting away with it and taking chances?
I suppose probably from my side of things, I'd probably be naive enough in that sense that, no, you'd like to think, but if there are people out there willing to cheat the system and doing it there's 30 players per squad, hurling and football, 60 in the county, the guts of 2,000 players on county panels, and 135 tests last year. That's less than 7%. You know, if players are willing to take risks and take chances to get away with things, there's a good chance that they will. And that's, you know, that's the level some people are going to, and I suppose that's the character, the type of character they are. If they're willing to do that, then fine. It's frustrating as a player. I think the difficulty and where this has kind of brought up issues is that the different counties, that having people around them and an environment where they can educate players and keep players on track with nutritionists, doctors, and having that. Maybe some counties don't have the ability to, or the funds to have that, and I think that causes huge problems.
Yeah, no, 100%, and some centralised idea of fixing that has to come to the fore in the next couple of days, certainly as this conversation goes on. Mickey, you've been great with your time. Thanks a million. Best of luck with everything. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
It's Mickey Quinn giving us some thoughts on the situation in Longford generally, and comparing and contrasting it with what happens in the AFL as well. 087 180 180 is the number to WhatsApp. Getting to Graham Hunter next, but I want to play you this clip from John Hartson, who was talking about some of his favourite Champions League memories. Obviously, he had a sensational time at Celtic. Here he is talking about a famous night. This is all part of our Virgin Media TV highlights, where you can now enjoy classic weekends of sport packed with some of the most memorable wins, losses, triumphs and upsets. It's all available on Virgin Media Sport. Have a look.
Barcelona are in your group. They come to Celtic Park. They win 3-1 in September 2004. Henrik Larsson returns and scores. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that. Was that in 2004?
Yes, 2004, September.
Henrik left? Yeah, he obviously left by then, of course. Yeah, I remember that game very well. Henrik scored the third goal. I think he lobbed the goalkeeper. It was a bad back pass, and he lobbed. I think I'd come off. I started the game, and then Chris Sutton equalised, if I'm not mistaken. And Henrik, playing for Barcelona, lobbed the goalkeeper. It was a terrible back pass by one of our defenders. And immediately everybody's looking at Henrik. What type of reaction will we get from him? He was such an icon at Celtic. The goals and everything else that he gave the team. He was an unbelievable player, and he just walked back to the halfway line as if nothing had happened. He didn't celebrate at all. He hardly mustered a smile, because obviously he still had a lot of affection for Celtic and the crowd at that time.
So that's a seriously good Barcelona team. That home leg was in September. The away leg then is 24th of November of 2004. Barcelona won, Celtic won. This is a Barcelona team with Valdez in goal, Puyol is there, Silvinho was there, Van Bronckhorst, Xavi was there, Deco was there. He was a really great player around that time.
Yeah. He was up to be one of the best players in the world at that time.
Yeah, he really was. He'd gone from Porto at that stage to that Barca team.
And he didn't quite hit the heights, I didn't feel. Sorry for butting in here,
go on.
At that particular time, as what he went to at Chelsea, he wasn't the same. He was a shadow of the player when he went to Chelsea after Barcelona.
Yeah.
But at Barcelona, Porto before that, he was an unbelievable talent.
He was, yeah. Iniesta was in the squad as well. And then just to round things off, and this is 2004, so we're talking pretty close to their peak. You had Eto'o and you had Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho around that time, John, it's not talked about maybe because he didn't do it for quite a long enough period, but when he was at his best for those few seasons, Ronaldinho was pretty close to best in the world.
Yeah, he was right up there, of course. An unbelievable talent again, quick, powerful, a goal scorer, could make goals. He was, people used to love watching him play. He could turn really sharply. Just a genius on the ball. But I've got to say, not many people know this, but Martin O'Neill had year pointed Jos Valhaeren that night to man mark Ronaldinho.
Right.
And Ronaldinho didn't get a kick.
Right.
Valhaeren was unbelievable. Martin said, look, if he goes to the toilet, you have to follow him in the toilets. Get that close to him. And he probably produced one or two little bits, but not enough to affect the game. And that was mainly through the Belgian centre-half that we had, Jos Valhaeren. He did a fantastic job on him that night, I have to say.
Graham Hunter, good morning to you. How you doing?
Hi, Jeff. Doing well. Enjoying listening to Big John there.
Good segue for you, because he's your 98th guest on the big interview.
It's kind of you to mention that, and I do admit I shared that just before the show because the interview with John isn't out yet, Ger. 98 guests feels like an achievement. And for example, although Joe's interview was very good there, did he searingly push in a Pulitzer way to find out that Big John is afraid of the dark? Because that's what comes out of the big interview, Jeff. So anyway, listen, it was good to hear him talking about that side that was playing from when I just moved permanently to Barcelona throughout the years many times. I worked on the pitch at Parkhead as TV summarisers for a game where Barcelona beat Celtic with Big John standing by my side and helping me through the atmosphere of a full Parkhead. And I remember watching Martin O'Neill's side knocking Frank Rijkaard's Celtic out of the UEFA Cup with a 1-0 win. I think Alan Thompson at Parkhead, and then a 0-0 draw at Camp Nou, which was actually an extraordinary, just an astonishing match. So they've been regular visitors to Spain while I've been living here, and John was a clever footballer as far as I was concerned.
Oh, 100%. I did want to talk to you about somebody else who passed away this week. It's Michael Robinson, a lesser figure of that Liverpool team, and even to a certain extent the Ireland team, despite the fact he was unbelievably talented, but like a titanic figure in Spanish broadcasting, who I know, again, was helpful to you when you moved over there as somebody else who was a non-native speaker.
I think he would have been helpful to me, had I been a young Spaniard. Alison, there's only 6 years difference between the two of us. But Michael was one of these guys who was gifted with an awful lot when he was made, because as you said, like his football career, starting from the time when Bobby Charlton knocks at his back door to say, "Son, go and get your dad. I want him to give me permission to sign you for Preston North End," all the way through to setting up the winner to take Brighton through to a FA Cup final, and then, as you say, winning the League Cup. And winning the Champions League, European Cup as it was then in Rome, forgetting the trophy and the duty-free and being sent back from the plane by Graham Souness, all the way to really being important in an Osasuna side that beat Barcelona, beat Real Madrid, won at the Cathedral San Mamés with Robinson in that Osasuna side, even though he couldn't find Osasuna on a map when he first moved there. All these things, and the movie star good looks, what they led to was a guy who went, well, my life's not even half finished now that I stopped playing football. And he became a charismatic, an extremely good first wave football analyzer. Now, I know, because I was born in the 60s, that in the very early 70s, we were beginning to get ex-footballers offering opinions on panels mid-football games. And occasionally, you'd begin to get in the 80s some co-commentary summarisers. But I still think that when Robinson began on Canal Plus here in 91, to not just offer little opinions in the studio in El Día Después, but to properly analyse and break football down and become a co-commentator who added value, which is still a flaw that many ex-footballers, ex-coaches have when they're on co-coms on a live match. They don't add value. They repeat what's just been said or what you've just seen. Not Michael. Michael's talent soared. And yes, even when he was extremely high profile at Canal Plus, for example, he was helping advise Florentino Perez that Steve McManaman would be a good signing from Liverpool. And courtesy of him, one of his team tipped me the whole story. Back when Steve moved from Liverpool to Real Madrid, I had a back page exclusive about the story all on its own. And Steve McManaman, this first time we met in Madrid, was like, how the hell? He didn't use the word hell. How the F did you get that story? Nobody knew. And Michael had said, give him the go-ahead for me to have that story. And what's more, once I moved to Spain, as you pointed out, when you met him, either over Goldfish Bowl-sized gin and tonics, because he liked the night, Michael, which is one of the reasons I so liked him, but also when you met him on the road, because doing football match commentary for La Liga, we would meet him and Carlos Martinez, his co-com for Canal Plus. We'd meet him on trains or planes or hotels or post-match, sometimes for dinners or drinks. And he rose to become a very clever TV content maker, in that he had superb people around him and he never failed to give credit to his research team. But he was an ideas man as well as a tremendous football analyst and a very persuasive, hypnotic sometimes TV presence. He had the magnetism that the camera liked him, his voice, his delivery, his articulacy, the fact that he was extremely fluent in Spain. I mean, almost from the get-go, he properly put himself to learning. And, do you know, I'll summarise by saying that not only were the front pages of the papers full of testimony to his greatness when he passed too early the other day, there were many Spaniards who I know who have nothing to do with this industry who texted me about losing the voice of their childhood, that losing the man who guided them through from infancy to grown up life watching the football that they loved. And we all know that sensation of losing a voice that has been with you throughout your life, a voice that you cherish. But those who knew him queued up to give testimony to the fact that really, I think you can use the word that this was a man of greatness, a man of huge spirit, charisma, good looks, talent. I don't know anybody who didn't enjoy his company. And it feels like a cruel loss. And Spain was really, really afflicted. And it said something about Spain, that this was a Leicester-born Irishman who wasn't treated as our pet foreigner. By Spain, he was treated as one of us. And that's not bad, Ger.
No, it's pretty amazing. Look, I actually didn't realise how high the broadcasting career had gone. So it was the main football analyst for a long period of time, and that was him.
He kicked off in El Dia Después the day after in 1991, and it was just a 2-person gig at that stage. And behind them, they'd replicated a football terracing, old-style terracing. And the first thing Michael did as the presenter welcomed him on board. We've got a great revelation. We've got Michael Robinson on, and he went, "Oh, I'm glad you've tidied up that set behind us, because it was covered with litter last season, and I really didn't like it. And there should be fans there." And the presenter was like, "Well, Michael, you don't see the litter after football matches because you're inside getting showered and press conferences and changes." And he's, "Well, I don't care. If we're having this set, I want fans on it." And from day one, where he started with that humour and that linguistic fluency, what I genuinely believe, the comparison I make, is that when Luca Vialli was sacked in '99, and I got an interview with him in his house in Eaton Square in London, I remember him saying, I said, "What next, Luca?" "Well, I'm off to Italy. I want to do for Italy what Andy Gray has done for the UK on Sky, because in Italy everything's negative. They criticise the defences, the referees, but they don't open football up and talk about what was well structured, what good ideas, tactical changes within a match. And I want Italy to open itself up. I want to copy Andy Gray." Well, Michael Robinson was doing that from '91, in that he wasn't simply there for decoration. He wasn't simply there to say, "Yes, you're right, that was a good goal." His tone immediately was, "Did you see this?" Or "My opinion is," or "When I was a player, one of the things they could have done. I know that player, I know that coach," because he was still very current on the scene. And from that day until his last match, which, ironically was at Anfield when Atleti went through in the Champions League, from that day to this, his tone was that of, "I can paint pictures for you," not only because he's a poet. He used words so well, but he understood football and was able to explain it in such a way that was neither highfalutin, nor was it monosodium glutamate. It was telling viewers things that they hadn't seen and bettering the majority of football pros that I've seen on television. But behind the scenes, he was coming up with a program called Inform Me Robinson, where his interviewing technique, Ger, and all of us trying to do this art know how difficult it is to engage with your guests, to make them relax and bring out things that the audience hasn't heard before, and to be themselves. So that it's not an interview necessarily, but a conversation. Michael had that art, to the extent that when he had Inform Me Robinson as a documentary on Cesc Fabregas and Gerard Piqué, the Glimmer twins of Spanish football, when they were a little bit younger than they are now, I'd say probably they were both about 24, 25, he got the two of them together because they'd been boyhood chums. And at this stage, Cesc was at Arsenal and Piqué was, breaking through well at Barcelona. And he got them to admit, much to Cesc's horror, that when they were tearaway kids, they'd nicked down to the beachfront here in Barcelona and gone around pinching petrol caps off cars just as a little hobby. And Piqué told this story in full flow, with Cesc gradually, I'll just do looking at him like this, or going, "Jerry, what are you doing?" And Robin's like, it's okay, the world will understand. And he cast a magic web of a really rich, brandy voice and a knowledge of his subjects, but also people skills, that made Inform Me Robinson Informs, this documentary series, principally about football to begin with, unmissable and elite. And then he expanded into other areas of society, other areas of sport. And he made some of the best sports documentary product in terms of TV hour-long or 55-minute-long sports documentary content this country has ever seen. And that's why I reach for greatness, because he was so multi-layered, and with it, unassuming, kind, interesting, funny, had a house in Biarritz, chose to live in Marbella for his last months, loved his golf. Heaven help you if you interrupted a day of golf with Michael Robinson. And I will miss him greatly. And you're right to talk about this Irish international, because when the noticia, when the news came out that he died, Spain really grieved. He was an adopted son.
Yeah, it sounds like he's going to be quite a loss in Spanish broadcasting. Graham, when we've spoken about football over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of struggled to find the importance in it, or to kind of find the energy to talk about real on-pitch matters. But there is a couple of real football stories developing over the last couple of weeks. One of them is the very real possibility of the Saudi Arabian takeover at Newcastle United. The back pages here this morning plastered with Mauricio Pochettino being linked to Newcastle United. It's going to be quite a payday for him if he gets the job. What is your take on all of this in terms of a career move for Pochettino? I think from Newcastle's perspective, it'll obviously be a very, very good appointment.
Whoa. Oh, and I really like the fact that this was nothing about the note that I got beforehand, and that you've gone to the crucial issue. I have to tread carefully here. I've been speaking recently to people who are at the club. Yesterday. I've been somebody who's peripheral to the takeover, not central, but nonetheless peripheral, has asked me my opinion on certain things that might happen in the structure at Newcastle once the takeover is complete. I know that there is still, irrespective of how would I say this, of how close the papers are and the exchange of papers and the financial niceties, there still remains on Ashley's part, a man I don't know, but I know people around him, a scepticism, particularly about Amanda Staveley. I'm not quite sure why, but that does remain even now. Directly to answer your question, I think that there is a taste amongst those who are attempting to buy Newcastle to fly a kite about Rafa Benitez returning. Pochettino's quality and untapped potential, for me, to answer your question straight, I view things, I've been taught by people I respect in football over my life, that the easier thing to do, particularly in spotting a player, but I think it applies directly to this situation, the easiest thing to do is to spot maybe what they don't have or don't do well, because that's very simple, and we all reach for kind of insurance nets, so that if something happens, you're part of the process of it happening. You can always say, well, I always said he wasn't very good at this. But the real people who jump ahead, I think, in sport, particularly in signing somebody in some manner or another, doesn't have to be a player, is saying, what more is there to come? Or what are the things that this person does that not everybody can? And in Pochettino's case, I'm applying that to this I think pretty false stigma about not having won anything. You know, he's coached at Espanyol, Southampton, and took Spurs to, within touching distance of winning the Champions League. So just like when there was this false thing about Klopp losing finals and then he starts winning them, Pochettino isn't simply a guy who's proven his ability to coach, a guy who's proven his ability to integrate with the character of football in England, nor is he simply a guy with fantastic contacts who could help a club, any club, sign brilliantly from out with the gene pool in Britain. And I think that is true of him. Pochettino could do that. In my opinion, he's still young and vibrant and bursting to win things. And were I an ambitious club, I would look on it as a positive that you're signing somebody intensely hungry to have the means to consistently win trophies. I can't, but I don't know what you've said, you guys, on your show, which is cutting edge. I can't say that if I were Pochettino, I would sign for that ownership. I can't say that. In fact, I wouldn't. But football tells you that it's a sport of expediencies, and people sometimes put personal and social concerns aside. So what Pochettino wants to do vis-a-vis this hypothetical opening at Newcastle, I haven't spoken to him about it, so I can't say. What I can say is that after Spurs sacked him, Arsenal sent Raul Sanllehi over to Buenos Aires to tempt him before they signed Arteta. For whatever reasons, that didn't work out. And it's my strong opinion that Pochettino believed prior to the Newcastle takeover that either Manchester United or Manchester City would come his way in due course. And I'd imagine that he has the financial stability to wait out and see what Pep Guardiola's attitude will be at the end of his one remaining year, which is next season. And therefore, I don't know if he would take this Newcastle job if offered on, is my honest opinion. You don't need me, none of you need me to say that it would be an extremely good fit for that club, for those hypothetical resources. But in my opinion, his attitude about wanting to be next in at Manchester City is something that would give him cause to stop and think very hard.
Graham, I did want to ask you about Fabio Capello, who said that, pardon me, that he believes Real Madrid are the one club who are going to largely be unaffected by what happens here. And I'm paraphrasing, and I might be doing it badly, but essentially he's saying Real Madrid are going to come out of this crisis well. Everybody else is a bit screwed in Spain. That's an oversimplification on my part. Is it an oversimplification on his part?
There's a lot of worth in what he says. First of all, Real Madrid have, in relative terms, spent pretty sparingly over the last 3-4 years. Secondly, Real Madrid have an extraordinarily large and talented squad where they can, if needs be, barter players or sell in whatever conditions we find the market once life begins to resemble normal again, or as close as we're going to get for many months. So if you look at their financial resources, their lines of credit, the assets that they've got to use currently, which are more than an elite coach would want. It's hard to manage a squad of that size. So they can either trade for what they need, or they do have the resources to buy, or they can sell to get what they need. And I think that Capello is alluding also to their credit lines, in that it will be far harder for certain financial institutions in Spain to see Real Madrid struggling than it would Athletic or Betis or Villarreal. So I don't think they'll be immune to it, but if you want to then make the comparison and net how do the other clubs come out of it, I think he's right. I think that the need to service debt at Atleti, the need to service debt at Barcelona, the needs of Barcelona's squad, in the terms of the other clubs, there is a what would you call it, an arc of financial resources whereby you'll find that Eibar have been badly affected by this, but their outgoings are not as much. They can manage their purse strings more tightly. They're used to existing on free transfers or low expenditure, and therefore broadly they will, pound for pound, be suffering less than Barcelona or Atleti. So Capello has, there's worth in what he says, and I think that if we extricate ourselves from the fact that all of us have been in the middle of a crisis and Spain has been crippled by it, it's not the first time on this show recently that we've talked about the fact that Real Madrid have invested in youth, have begun to invest, in my personal view, more wisely, less extravagantly, and with more cohesive and clear strategy than was the case in the Galactico era and the post-Galactico era. And therefore, if they are well equipped for what comes next, then you take your hat off to them.
Graham, stay well. Thanks a million for joining us.
You too, guys. Thank you.
It's Graham Hunter giving us some thoughts on a range of different topics. We went a bit long there, but obviously I hadn't, realised that Michael Robinson had been so influential a figure for Graham at various stages in his career as well. So it was good to get that insight. 087 9180 180 is the number to WhatsApp us here, and you can give us any of your thoughts on any of the stuff that we're covering today, and we'll get to some of those comments a little bit later on. Right, so we're going to get stuck into a Classic Game Club next as we take a look back at Ireland-England from Italia 90. But if you missed any of today's show, you can catch it all back up on our YouTube channel or via our podcast network. Back after this.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB Sports Radio.
If you're feeling a little like you're going a bit stir crazy, take a break and listen to Richie's Isolation Mix. 1 hour of ad-free music every day from midday on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
Good evening, and you're welcome to our World Cup coverage on a day of historic importance for Ireland. In less than an hour, we line out against England in Cagliari and take our place in the World Cup finals for the very first time.
Still in play. What? For Lineker, danger here, and Lineker almost there, and Gary Lineker is there, and England are in front. Won by Butcher. Now here's Sheedy. Sheedy's running back, and Sheedy shoots. Oh, it's there! And Kevin Sheedy, who's enjoying his best period in an Irish shirt, has right out of nothing conjured the equaliser.
Gary, very different to the game in Stuttgart when England got the early break, and you must have thought it was going to be decisive.
Well, we hope so, but of course the Irish, they showed tremendous spirit. They just kept battling and putting the long ball into the box, and I suppose eventually it paid off. I'm a bit disappointed to have lost the extra point, but hopefully it'll mean both teams can get a good result in one of the next two games, and both of us go through.
It's a game we couldn't afford to lose. We've got to go in against Egypt now, and if we can beat Egypt, we've got 3 points, and then we can go against Holland, and we'll see what happens against Holland. But we needed 2 points now against Egypt.
Yeah, this is the Classic Game Club. We're looking back on Italia 90, the Republic of Ireland against England. This is usually the segment where we go back and pick an amazing game from history and revel in how marvellous it is. Not the case this week. We've picked a fairly mediocre game, I think it's fair to say, to go back and watch, but it's memorable for all the narrative around it, for, I presume, Nathan and Ger, a load of unbelievably happy childhood memories for you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Owen. You've just ruined all of those memories with a cold dose of reality. We're going to have to rename this segment as the game we watched so you didn't have to, because, dear God, that first 45 minutes was the longest 45 minutes of my life.
No.
You cannot disagree with that, Ger. You cannot come up with a hot take and be a contrarian that this was actually
I'm not being a
game.
contrarian. I'm not saying there were loads of bits of reasonable football being played. You got to see
where
Kevin Sheedy was really good. Ray Houghton was excellent. Paul McGrath was sensational. Like that England team, when you look at the quality of the footballers that are playing in that England team, bear in mind that this is not about football being shit in 1990. The weather conditions are absolutely atrocious, which they bang on about repeatedly in the interminable opening to it. So it's gale force gusts of wind. Like I actually didn't think it was as bad as it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, given how the cold, clammy hand of hindsight from Captain Hindsight's Sheehan there. That's the received wisdom now. I was like, don't bother watching this game. There's no point to it. But actually, I disagree. There's loads of stuff going on here.
What do you remember from the time when you guys both watched it live, or from the moment live? Was it the ecstasy of Italia 90, which initially made you feel that everything that happened from an Irish perspective was just great?
Well, I also made the mistake of watching some of the post-match reports, which put me really in the mood for it. And so after that, everything that you're watching is like, this is cool. I did definitely have that dread. The overwhelming feeling was that dread that England are going to do to us in this game what they threatened to do to us in Stuttgart but couldn't score. And so after they went 1-0 up, I remember being terrified that they were going to score and a floodgate somehow would open, because you're 13, you don't really have the
knowledge that actually Ireland are a really good football team and have loads of brilliant players on their side and are men and are going to stand up no matter what happens in this game. And so they did. But I definitely, that was the thing that was, the recall was the fear that, Gary Lineker's good at football. There's John Barnes, there's Waddle, there's Gascoigne. Oh, Brian Robson's actually playing in this match too. Oh, and they have Beardsley. Jesus, what a team.
What do you remember, Nathan, from your live experience?
I was only 8 at the time, so my actual memories of the game are the celebration of when Kevin Sheedy scored and right on the full-time whistle, not hanging around for any post-match analysis. I didn't really care what Eamon Dunphy thought. All I knew is I now wanted to be Kevin Sheedy. I didn't care if he was an Everton player. All I wanted to do, myself and my next-door neighbour, one of us was Packy Bonner, one of us was Kevin Sheedy, and we just played for the next 3 or 4 hours. It was just the joy of the occasion. So most of my thoughts on the game are sort of built on probably everything I've read about it and heard about it down through the years, and the celebrations and the walking down roundabout and all of that sort of stuff and everything that followed and the win against Romania. The actual 90 minutes, I have no memory aside from Kevin Sheedy's goal. I have no sense of watching it with any sort of tactical eye. I was just a kid knowing that something big was happening in my house, that my dad was bloody excited. It wasn't quite, my first footballing memory was, I'm fairly sure I was 6 probably, Euro 88, Ireland against Netherlands, and it was the first time I ever heard my father curse. It was the first time I'd ever heard the word wanker.
Wow. Who was the wanker?
I'm fairly sure it was Wim Kieft, yeah.
Right. Or the referee for not giving the offside as it would have been in Euro 88. Was this not the moment, Owen, where you were convinced of Andy Townsend's greatness or Ray Houghton's greatness? Or Paul McGrath, more importantly?
Yeah, Paul McGrath in midfield, sensational. I think, I don't know who was actually man of the match. I mean, we'll get into secret man of the match later, but I presume it was Paul McGrath. And at least I think I saw Jack Charlton say afterwards that Paul McGrath probably deserved the award afterwards. It's pretty tough to pick one, though, is it not? It's pretty tough to be unbelievably impressed, sure, by anybody in the Ireland midfield. Of course, like Houghton and Townsend have touches of class here and there, but that's all it is. It's glimpses. It's almost like when Wes came off the bench in recent days and had a touch or two of unbelievable quality that we didn't have in other areas of the pitch. It was just like that constantly throughout the 90 minutes where there was little glimpses of the Irish players, because all they did was lump ball forward to Cascarino, and that was the tactic. And the wind carried the ball a little bit too far in the first half and didn't carry it far enough in the second half. That was... I
know. I think you've been conditioned from the criticism to think that there was definitely... So it was interesting. I thought it was interesting to see Liam Sheedy pick the ball up on...
Kevin Sheedy.
The kind of inside... Sorry, exactly.
It was really interesting to see Liam Sheedy appear.
Oh, Jesus. Right. Has anybody else found their brain power diminished over the course of this whole lockdown?
It's okay. I kept calling Michael Jordan. I kept calling Michael Jordan Michael Jackson in last week's basketball podcast, so that's okay.
Well, that's potentially libelous, I suspect.
To who?
Oh, God.
Well, you can't libel the dead.
Let's move on. So when Kevin Sheedy was picking the ball up, it was interesting to find that occasionally he was drifting over into the inside right position, that he wasn't actually an out-and-out left, I'm going to hug the touchline winger, that there was a bit more fluidity to this Jack Charlton setup than Laurie McMenemy would have you believe, or the hype around the team. They obviously weren't trying to pass the ball out from the back, but they were a high press team who were not letting Gascoigne settle, not letting Waddle settle, not letting Brian Robson settle on the ball. And I'm taking into account some of the conditions, but Ray Houghton was brilliant, like a brilliant ball playing midfielder who was dangerous every time he got the ball, and so nasty and aggressive as well. It was great.
My thoughts are maybe somewhat affected by the Ireland-Italy match from USA 94, which we covered recently on the Classic Game Club, and how impressed I was with how Ireland played in that match and how often they did get the ball down and in midfield. And listen, it was a midfield with Roy Keane in there, that there were a lot of periods during that game, conditions obviously far better and complete extreme from what we saw in the England match, but there were lots of different areas you could look at where they tried to play ball. It was nowhere near long ball. They didn't have a Tony Cascarino. They had a Tommy Coyne up front. But this was just, as you say, when you look at the quality of the two midfields in that game, Like, Ireland could have offered so much more. Now, maybe when you look at what Ireland's ability was of McGrath, Houghton, Townsend, Sheedy, you would think, yeah, they should have done. But that English midfield, that's an English midfield Steve McMahon couldn't get into. Steve McMahon, at that stage, was part of an all-conquering Liverpool side. That English midfield of Robson, Waddle, Gascoigne and Barnes. Barnes has just won Footballer of the Year for the second time in 3 seasons. He's pretty much at the peak of his powers. So maybe, and I don't think Jack Charlton never had any other thoughts, but maybe the right thing to do was to just put them under a bit of pressure, to get at them and not give them any time in the ball and not overly think about what we're going to do when we had it. Because there's no question those players, those Irish players, could have done a lot more. And in comparison to what they did against Italy 4 years later, they did little or nothing, I thought, in this game.
Definitely. Just for context here, the three of us have been watching the game from Archive Eurosport. So we had Peter Brackley and Larry McMenemy into our earballs rather than George Hamilton. The game is going to be on TG Cahir this Friday night. So there might be a bit of George Hamilton goodness in that. So I dare say Brackley and McMenemy are going to come up. Just go through the teams, as Nathan mentioned, a star-studded England team. The commentators refer to Peter Shilton as the best goalkeeper in the world. He's 40 years old at this point. He's in goal for England. It's a back four of Gary Stevens, Terry Butcher, Des Walker and Stuart Pearce. As you mentioned, that star-studded midfield. Chris Waddle, Paul Gascoigne, the captain Brian Robson and John Barnes, Peter Beardsley and Gary Lineker up front. They both get taken off for Steve McMahon and Steve Bull, respectively. Steve McMahon comes on and basically is a delight for Ireland. He has a shocker when he comes off the bench. The Republic of Ireland then, Packy Bonner in goals, back four of Chris Morris, Mick McCarthy, the captain, Kevin Moran and Steve Staunton, Ray Houghton, Paul McGrath, Andy Townsend and Kevin Sheedy in midfield with John Aldridge and Tony Cascarino up front. Alan McLaughlin comes on for John Aldridge after 64 minutes. It's an excellent team. Like, go on, Ger.
The Alan McLaughlin fetish. What the hell was Jack Charlton thinking? How in God's name are you bringing him on at that stage for John Aldridge in this game when we're chasing a goal? It made no sense. It made absolutely no sense.
With Niall Quinn sitting there on the bench.
This might have been. Was this his debut? Was it? It was certainly his.
I think he had one cap going into Italia 90.
Yeah, and this is the first game of the World Cup, and you're giving him half an hour out there. And like, look, obviously he goes on to have a moment in time that is hugely important for Irish football history, but that was not the time to be throwing him into that. Oh, they won't have done any research on you. Off you go in there, and it's like, well, my teammates don't know how to pass me the ball because they don't know what kind of runs I make. That didn't make any sense to me.
Well, maybe that's why, as Larry McMenemy said, Jack Charlton is the master strategist.
Yes, I mean. They were buddies, weren't they?
How much time there was a part of the most enjoyable part of this was maybe the fact that we were watching an English commentary, because what patronizing pricks.
Yes.
Oh my God. So watching back the RTE commentary would have probably been a more nostalgic feeling and a warm feeling and getting to the moments that we all remember so well. But this was somehow how the English looked at us. 2 years, pretty much to the day after we had beaten them, they still looked at us as some little pygmies that tried our best, despite the fact that our players played for their champions. They played for the exact same clubs. They still had little or no respect. Larry McMenemy, 30 seconds before Kevin Sheedy scores the equaliser, is berating the Irish supporters for having a little bit too much expectation, getting a little bit ahead of themselves, a little bit cocky, thinking, they could come to a World Cup for the first time and actually do something. How dare they? They weren't really getting behind their side in the way they really should. Piss off, like.
Yeah, it was glorious, actually, to listen to that. I'm like, this all looks very familiar. There's a goal coming here, and they're starting on about us, our expectations being too high. It's funny how the tyranny of empire ruins even the nicest of individuals like Larry McMenemy.
What were our real expectations in 1990? Like, surely Stuttgart changes everything, does it not?
Well, so I don't have a memory of the time of the expectations, but obviously you can look at that 11 and the quality is there. But you look at Ireland's form around that time, it was touched on in commentary, 6 goals conceded in 28 games. In the 3 years before Italia 90, Ireland had lost 2 matches between friendlies and competitive games. They lost to Spain in qualification, and obviously at Euro 88 they lost to that unbelievable Dutch side. They'd beaten Spain during qualifying. They'd beaten England at Euro 88. They'd drawn with France and West Germany in the previous year in friendlies. They'd beaten Brazil a couple of years before that. So if you take away the fact it's a debut experience at a World Cup finals for everybody, like the pedigree is there both in terms of players and results, that there should be a reasonable level of expectation.
From that team that day as well, we're missing Ronnie Whelan, David O'Leary and Chris Hughton are on the bench. They're both on the bench. They're both, neither of them are selected for this game. But like Ronnie Whelan being out, how big a deal is that?
Well, it's a huge deal because he breaks his foot and only gets fit for the Egypt game, I think. So, like, a fully fit Ronnie Whelan changes everything, because then you put him in. Now, according to the commentary, they were going to take Kevin Sheedy out and play Ronnie Whelan on the left side, which, you know, wasn't an unusual position for Ronnie Whelan to play in club football. But for Ireland, what we could have had was Ronnie Whelan in the middle of midfield alongside Townsend and pushed Paul McGrath back to centre-back, where he was legitimately world-class. And that takes Mick McCarthy out of the team, and that vastly improves the team, in my opinion. How did you think Mick McCarthy played, Nathan?
Well, I thought his throw-ins were just stupendous.
Yes, exactly.
Dear God,
his throw-ins.
God, there was a lot of...
I agree.
No, he wasn't the only guilty party. Like, he was by far and away the most guilty party of just murdering the ball consistently. Never got to grips with the wind as to how far he should hoof it forward. There was no magnet to Tony Cascarino's head. It was straight over the top of Tony's head. And that maybe is, when we're getting into sliding doors moments, of how that team would have looked differently if you had a centre-back pairing of Paul McGrath and David O'Leary and Ronnie Whelan in the middle of midfield. Perhaps it could have been a totally different experience in terms of how they played the ball. But McCarthy didn't do anything wrong defensively. There was one brilliant tackle laid on in the second half on John Barnes. But Steve Staunton was as guilty at times. Like, you compare again that game against Italy in USA 94, where Staunton time and time again is getting on the ball. He's picking out the runs of the midfielders, playing it into the centre circle. Jesus, the aimless hoofing again and again.
Staunton's 10 years younger than Mick McCarthy. He's 21, and McCarthy is the captain at 31, and he's the tone
But he's
setter,
twice the ability.
Well, he does, but I'm sure at 21, he's a little bit nervous playing in the World Cup, and he looks over and sees his captain, hoof, and he's like, well, I mean, that's what I'm going to do. It's exactly my job. Now, in fairness, that's also the football culture at the time. There's a bit in the second half where Brian Robson gets the ball and hoofs it, and Laurie McMenemy was like, that's exactly what Paul Gascoigne should be doing. That's what wisdom gets you. That's what experience gets you. And it's like, what? I mean, Ireland have the ball again, and we're about to attack. Why is that the right thing to do? But so look, there's a mix, right? There is the football culture of the time, and I think that if they had demanded a bit more from Steve Staunton, he would have been capable of delivering that. Look, it is absolutely sliding doors moment, and maybe we should start with that. Like, an Ireland team with O'Leary, and I'm just checking the age profile. So O'Leary was 32 and Mick McCarthy was 31. So it's not a significant difference. I don't know if O'Leary was fit and still first choice for Arsenal at this stage.
No, I think at that stage he was sort of in and out. I think Steve Bold and Adams were starting to form their partnership, but he was still, as you say, he wasn't mid-30s David O'Leary. He could still contribute.
Yeah, and I mean, Kevin Moran is 34, and there's no doubts about him being in the team at this point. So, like, it's definitely a conservative selection in the squad. When you go back and look at the squad, like, John Byrne is in the squad, David Kelly is in the squad, Bernie Slavin is in the squad, and Frank Stapleton is in the squad. So that's 4 players in your very small World Cup squad that aren't going to see a meaningful minute unless there is an absolute crisis. And you know they're not really going to see a meaningful minute because Aldridge is going to play almost everything. And it turns out when you're taking Aldridge off, you're putting on Alan McLaughlin, who no one really knows anything about. Like, was there room for Liam Brady in the squad, I wonder, like, to come on and change games, to be the Wes Hoolahan for 10, 15 minutes at the end of matches?
But he didn't want a Wes Hoolahan to come on. He wanted an Alan McLaughlin.
I know, and so that doesn't make any sense. Parts of Big Jack's strategy are absolutely perfect. It's an in-your-face, front-foot aggression that the whole country can get behind. It's our sporting identity, the Fighting Irish. As much and all you might hate that, we are definitely a team who likes to be on the front foot. Even in rugby, even as the most cultured of the rugby teams we've ever had, it's an aggressive line speed and defence, and it's being creative off the back of that gets us there. For our boxers, with the exception of Andy Lee, almost none of them were counter-punchers. Most of them are wearing you down, all action styles. You think of Wayne McCullough, you think of Steve Collins. Like, our sporting culture is getting up and being in your face, put them under pressure. It's perfect. The bit that misses after that is the little bit of finesse that this Ireland team had and just couldn't get out.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of make the point about Ronnie Whelan before this game and how pivotal that is in terms of our enjoyment of this as a classic game. I actually don't think it affects how this game looks as a piece of entertainment. Does it affect Ireland's chances of winning a game? Of course it does. He's one of Ireland's greatest ever players, but I think he fits into the Charlton system. And it's, as you say, it's the dribs and drabs he might have picked up in this game, a bit of magic dust might have created something a little bit different, because I just don't see how different personnel being available would have persuaded Jack Charlton to go out with a different game plan against this England team.
No, I don't even think the inclusion of Ronnie Whelan would have dramatically changed the match. And maybe we are underestimating the impact of the weather and just how wet and thunder and lightning and miserable it actually was to play in. And England's midfield, I thought Gascoigne was brilliant and Waddle had flashes, but like Barnes was quiet as well, except for parts of the second half, that maybe it was just very difficult to get on the ball. Now, everything we've seen from Ireland over the rest of the tournament suggested that they had no other game plan. But I wonder, and I know there's clips of Dunphy post-match, but I wonder how much support there was for Dunphy in terms of criticism for the style of play, or was the vast majority just to be happy and be there for the ride? Like, they touched on, Ireland hadn't been beaten since November 1988, so for almost 2 years, and like everything I went through, there should have been an expectation. We're going through teams of greatest Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal teams with John Giles at the moment, and there's Irish players of this generation in all those teams that they had the quality. They had the quality to go and bring it to the English if they wanted. But the fact it was absolutely no effort. It was.
I don't think there's no effort. I actually think that when Houghton has the ball, he's not hoofing it to the back post, trying to get somebody to win a knock on and win the second ball. He's getting the ball and he's looking up and he's finding Sheedy, and Sheedy's finding Townsend, and Townsend's flicking it to McGrath, and McGrath's like that. From midfield forward, we are playing football. It's just that we haven't been encouraged or conditioned to do it. Like, bear in mind the difference between us absolutely going for it and playing football is a place in the semi-finals versus a place in the quarterfinals. And even then, we probably would have had to overcome the home nation to get there. I mean, maybe if we'd gone through the front door, you have England's route, you've got Cameroon in the quarterfinal, so perhaps you end up beating Cameroon. But there's no guarantees. So, like, we're looking at a historic level of achievement from this group of players and nitpicking to see what the alternative would have done. I don't think we were going to win that tournament. I mean, I don't know. I think Argentina would have beaten us, and I think Germany would have beaten us. But, you know, strange things do happen in knockout football. So in terms of my recollection is that most people thought Dunphy was a bit of an upstart, and he was not right, but like, you know, it's kind of entertaining what he's saying, and we're going to at least tolerate that. But then we reserved the right to call him a bollocks at the end of it.
Was there a national lack of belief at that stage? Because I know in Declan Lynch's book that he wrote around Italia 90 Days of Heaven, he said that Jack Charlton was the only man who had less belief that Ireland could win the World Cup than we had ourselves.
I mean, yeah, I like, when you were asking about the expectation, again, I don't know, I'm 13, so it's not like we're kind of having these conversations that are like, you know, I've done my research here, and well, actually probably I knew every team because the Italia 90 sticker book. Yeah, which you know, you filled that, of course. But I don't think that everybody thought that we were going to go there and win. Like, you know, you're a small country, and even in 2002, I kind of had to be talked into in advance of the tournament what our chances were. Look, it's a World Cup. I mean, you just forget that you're going up against Brazil and Argentina and Italy, and these are teams that we've never played. Like, so we played 3 games in Euro 88, and the first game was a fluky 1-0 win, and then the Dutch were a great team, but like, did they fully play that well against us? And we played really well against Russia. So like, they were the only big games in a tournament that we played. There was also a fear that we were going to freeze somehow, just because we had no experience of it. I guess the short answer is it's complicated.
I want to come back to Dunphy in a little while once we get into the aftermath of this, because there's some great audio that we want to play you. But just to actually go through some of the categories of this match, thankfully the match doesn't actually have a whole pile to throw up. If you had to pick your moment of the game, what would it be? Like, Sheedy's goal obviously is there. like Lineker's goal is barely worth mentioning. It's such a bizarre happening within the game. Like, is Paddy Bonner to blame? Like, Chris Waddle deserves a hell of a lot of credit for
where was Big Mick? I mean, I know Nathan is a big Mick fan, and he's kind of wedded to defending him at every available opportunity. What the hell is he doing getting
What are you on about? What are you on about?
From the right wing. I mean, you're love for Big Mick. You're basically his last remaining booster in the media at this point.
What are you talking about? I honestly don't know where this has come from.
I think
somehow you're trying to use what happened inside Pan to question his performance 12 years earlier. That somehow there was something deep rooted in him, even then, that meant he was going to cut up for our country at a crucial moment.
I did think he gets caught under the flight of the ball. You know, I'm not sure. I don't think Paul McGrath would have got caught under the flight of that ball. I think McGrath would have headed that away, and it would have been 0-0 after 9 minutes, 8 minutes, and away we go.
It's a ridiculously good ball from Waddle.
It is a good ball. It is a good ball. Waddle was good in patches, but like they put him under pressure. That his first possession is passing the ball out of touch. My moment of the match is obviously Gary Lineker having a shit. Like when you see it now and you know what's happening, and he's looking up going, I've shut my pants. It's like, and then for the next 5 minutes, you're like, who's he touching with those fingers? He's bending down to wipe, and the camera picks him out and then goes away. You're like, no, don't leave. We need to see what's happening. Why is Gary Lineker on the ground again, wiping his fingers on the ground? Like,
before coronavirus, there was Gary Lineker's shitty hands.
Mickey went to first.
I really wish Larry McMenemy. Picked up on it, and we got a full Larry McMenemy commentary of what was actually happening here. But it's a strange thing. I'd forgotten it happened in this game actually, but it's very, very obvious at the moment. And even the teammates, after he tells them what happens, they're like, "Okay, Grant, game face on." They don't blink twice. They're like, "That's fine. Our teammate has just done this thing. We're going to carry on." But yeah, the oblivious commentators is the biggest missed opportunity.
I'm walking away though. Yeah, there's a chance that Barnes has a little bit later on that fizzes across, and he kind of throws his body at it. If he got a header to it, it was going straight in. I mean, like heroic levels of working under the circumstances where, I mean, if any of us shot ourselves, we wouldn't go to work. I'd like to think.
Well, he was at work at the time. Like, do you stay at work? So you're in the middle of an interview. Home. You're in the middle of an interview, Ger. You've got Lance Armstrong on the line. What do? Do you keep the interview going?
Hello?
I mean, yeah. I suppose it's once in a lifetime, right?
What's going through his head? Like, when you know what's happened. Like, obviously, it's a different time, so it's 30 years ago now, so there's not quite as many TV cameras, and there's not quite, you're not going to be plastered all over Twitter 2 minutes later and 50 million people have looked at the video.
It's still the World Cup.
But still, you've got to worry that when you go to your post-match interview and you decide to be patronising towards the Irish, that the first question is going to be, yeah, they didn't try very much, but at least they didn't shit their pants.
Were you a bit nervous, son? Was that it?
Big Mick made him nervous. Big Mick made him nervous.
Here you go. It'll work out. You did give the shit out of him a couple of times, which I was quite happy about.
If I had to just pick one other moment of the match before we move on, it's just that run from Chris Waddle late in the game where I think it's
Gaza. It's Gaza.
Gaza punching. Who does he?
No, it's Gaza who makes the run. It's not Chris Waddle. I'm nearly certain. Yeah.
Is it?
Well, because there's too much pace
for the penalty.
Yeah.
What could have been a penalty?
Yeah.
No, that's Waddle. It's Waddle is the one who's fouled and he goes down injured. There's no replay.
Yeah, where he gets flicked up in the air. It's not. It's because it's number 19. He's got two numbers on his back.
No, but you're thinking of a different incident then.
Where he dribbles past four players and Mick McCarthy kills him in the penalty area, gives away a penalty, and the referee doesn't give it. That's the incident, right?
I think yes, that sounds exactly like it is. But I was 99% sure it was Chris Waddle because it was down the right wing, and the commentator says it's Chris Waddle. And we've got
and the camera goes to Chris Waddle.
Yeah,
it's down the left wing is the one I'm talking about.
Okay, different incident then.
Okay. But I think there were only clearly two moments of magic dust throughout this. John Barnes as well. That it is a game where something like that was just going to break out, and maybe it was one moment of magic he was going to win it, but that's about it. But you might have to pick out Waddle's run as perhaps the classiest moment of the match. It's really slim pickings.
Yeah, again, I think you have to probably give a lot of credit to Chris Morris and Steve Staunton, considering they're going up against Waddle and Barnes, and both of them have flashes. Waddle more so. But as I said, Barnes is Footballer of the Year at this stage and is week in, week out destroying teams in the English First Division. And in the first half, he barely gets a sniff of the ball. Second half, once or twice, the ball breaks in his favour and he gets to stretch the legs properly. But generally, Morris, every time he gets it's on top of him. And because of the way the cameras are, they all seem to be on one side of the pitch. You see it in the first half quite a bit when Waddle gets on the ball. Like, instantly, Staunton is on top of him. Townsend is coming across. Houghton's there as well. They knew that they just couldn't let him get a run. But as you say, there was 2 or 3 times in that run for the penalty. I don't know how we never saw a replay. It does look like he was absolutely clattered.
Like, you'd wonder, was it, like, in the middle of the commentary, they're like, well, Laurie McMenaby's screen has gone off because a bolt of lightning has hit his monitor. I wonder if, like, another bolt of lightning came and hit the production box, and they're like, we actually can't get a replay for this.
But we should point out as well that Ireland should have had a penalty.
Which incident is this again?
So, about 90 seconds, 2 minutes after Lineker's goal, there is a far more clear-cut penalty where Des Walker capitulates Ray Houghton. He just goes straight through him, cuts him in half. And because the ball, it's one of those where the ball sort of flicks on and there's a half-hearted shot at the end of it, the referee just allows things to continue. But it was a nailed-on penalty.
Playing advantage, isn't that how that works? The fruity tackles, definitely, you wouldn't get away with today. There'd be several red cards if Michael Oliver was to re-referee this one. Actually, I liked our shirts. The referee in the matches, the post-match reports of the pubs around, but I'm there for those jerseys.
Yeah, one of our nicest ever, possibly our nicest ever. Before we get into those sort of things, just our secret man of the match from this, I think, as I said at the top, Paul McGrath was mentioned by Jack as his man of the match afterwards. Lads, I'm not sure about the whole Steve Staunton hate here. I think he's a contender. You mentioned Chris Morris as well. I think that Ireland's fullbacks both had an excellent day at the office, as well as Ray Houghton.
The beauty of Paul McGrath is, again, having watched him 4 years later at Giant Stadium, where it's a backs to the wall job and maybe over time has been blown up to be something it's not, but you know that the legs are gone, the knees are gone. There's 2 or 3 occasions where you're watching in the first half and you're, is that Paul McGrath sprinting at full speed, marauding through the midfield, where he just turns and twists and turns his body that, like, 18 months later, he's probably not able to. And you rarely, if ever, have seen that side of Paul McGrath. It is the defensive linchpin who can play the right ball, who can craft things from the back, but actually skipping around challenges, injecting a little bit of pace is something we rarely, if ever, saw from McGrath. So that's something that stood out. I thought the man of the match was Gascoigne. Pretty much every time he got his close control in what looked to be unbelievably difficult conditions. His ability to float 25, 30-yard balls over the fullbacks again and again. Probably played a little bit deeper than they would have liked. So it was picking it up a lot off the 2 centre halves, where you would have thought maybe you leave that to Robson and you get him into a more number 10 position. But because Beardsley was there, he probably ended up playing a little bit deeper than you would have expected. But I just thought every time Gascoigne got on the ball, he was class.
On the file that we watched with an hour and 30 seconds gone, Gascoigne gets the ball in the left wing spot and dribbles, like, really close control, around about 4 people into the penalty area and gets completely upended, like does essentially a 360 in the penalty area from Mick McCarthy and the referee waves play on. Is that the incident you guys are talking about?
Oh,
it's 100% Gascoigne.
No, it's Chris Waddle.
When does the Waddle one happen? When does the Waddle one happen?
Down to the left hand. It's in the second half, isn't it?
Yeah, it is in the second half, and it's definitely down the right hand side.
It's down the right hand side.
It's before the equaliser.
Okay. No,
in and around the equaliser anyway. I thought it was after.
The equaliser.
Gascoigne is sensational, and I think the one thing that probably doesn't do him service or the event service at all is the fact that the television quality just isn't great. Like, I'm not sure is it the audio recording, but the atmosphere sounds fairly shite. You can barely hear the anthems at the start.
The anthems are screwed up. There's definitely no they've killed the mics, but it sounds like the God Save the Queen completely drowns out Aaron Levine from what I can see, which is a bit like, come on, lads.
Well, there's also quite a bit of noise, I think, in fairness, during God Save the Queen.
Hopefully.
I couldn't tell whether they turned it down. On Gaza, again, Laurie McMenemy, who was in some ways the star of the show of this game, mentioned that Gaza had lost 2 stone in the previous 12 months.
For giving up chocolate.
He giving up chocolate and drinking that funny stuff. Like, is he talking about fizzy drinks or
beer?
Because I don't think he had given up the funny stuff.
Homemade hooch. Is that what it was? Lineker absolutely kills Big Mick in a physical challenge at one point, gets around and slides the ball through for Brian Robson, who is about to be in a very difficult situation, and McGrath just shepherds him, doesn't even put a hand on him, but because he's so big, you're thinking these two obviously know each other incredibly well, semi-responsible for ruining each other's Manchester United careers in some way, or certainly from Robson's perspective, slowing him down with the collective enabling that happened in their lives. And it was just a beautiful piece of nonchalant defending from somebody who was cleaning up somebody else's mess. But I thought that was interesting. That Lineker was actually a really good player.
Yeah, do you know what's incredible? It turns out that there was some sort of player cam at this match. I didn't think they had that sort of technology back in 1990, but Ger has clearly watched this in some sort of Mick McCarthy cam, where for the entire 90 minutes he has sat there taking notes. What's he done this time? What's he done this time? Lineker was a proper fox in the box Lineker in that match. I don't remember him touching the ball outside the penalty area too often.
I'm not even sure if he touched the ball for the goal, to be quite honest with you. The touch is very clandestine, I think it's fair to say, for Lineker. In fairness, but you got
chest.
Yeah, but it's at first look, you're like, how did that even come off Gary Lineker? You almost need the replay to actually see it. Just in terms of stuff that was trending at the time that jars now, so we might just start from the vantage point of 2020. What wouldn't work today? So the things that jarred with you, it said so much. Back pass route, obviously worst thing in the history of humankind. Terrible thing. The throw-ins, which we've already mentioned, for Mick McCarthy. Both teams.
We should do more of them. Do more of the throw-ins. Honestly, there was a couple of times where I was just come on.
The first throw in about 2 minutes in down the left-hand side, where
he scored.
He takes advantage of the wind that sort of swerves just as it's coming to Shilton and nearly goes straight into the top corner. If that had gone in, Mick McCarthy's a superstar. This guy has reinvented the game of football. How has nobody ever thought of doing this before?
Can you score?
That could have been what people remembered from.
Are you allowed to throw it in? Does it?
You are. Yeah, you are. Yeah, but it has to bounce, I think.
And do we know, did he do a clinic with Rory Delap to encourage him to do this?
Again, I don't understand why we never took any advantage of Rory Delap's ability when he was there for us. It was, again, I'm all about our sporting identity. I had no problems with the long throw-ins.
You just had a problem with the thrower.
Exactly. I hate the sinner, not saint, sin, whatever that is.
But one of the things of its time and still relevant now is that you look at modern goalkeepers, the likes of Ederson and Alisson, they're very much a creative force for their team. They start off an awful lot of attacks, and we were similar in Italia 90. They had Gaza as their main playmaker. Our main playmaker essentially was Packy Bonner. Give it back to Packy, get that bit of grit and determination in his jaw, and hoof it as long as possible. That was, by and large, our main attacking threat. And in fairness, it worked.
I'd say if you were a fullback in that Ireland team, you would have automatic grounds for workplace bullying. Packy Bonner shouted at me and he aggressively screamed in my face like no other person's ever screamed in my face. I would say that if you're Steve Staunton or Morris, you'd be able to have that legitimate complaint. At the end, when he's telling everybody to get up the pitch, I'm surprised his molars don't crush in front of the cameras because he's gritted his teeth so hard. He's a terrifying goalkeeper when he's talking to his defenders, telling him, get out of the way, I'm hoofing this ball.
On his Donegal Mount Rushmore, they should have his face grimaced. That would
100%
be the most appropriate. I just thinking about another Donegal man, Jim McGuinness, was obviously in the papers during the week talking about how his players weren't burnt out. That was a mental thing. And also saying that he thinks that the final frontier for tactics in football is actually kickouts. And I'm thinking, there are no new ideas, it turns out, in sport. Jack Charlton was already there with the tactical kickouts.
Yeah, that's for sure. Put it right in the head of Cascarino and they were away. Just a couple of things that would sit well in 2020. You've mentioned the Ireland jersey. If we could just...
There's no need to be making any new jerseys ever once you hit that point in 1990. It's absolutely perfect. And then the other thing that would obviously sit well, given the current situation with the pandemic, is Chris Waddle's hair. That is lock-in hair, if ever I've seen it. That mullet was a sweet, sweet mullet. We are all going to be looking like Chris Waddle from 1990 in about 4 weeks' time, I dare say.
Yeah, it's coming. Aidan's had his haircut. Did you not get your haircut?
No, I did not. No. I'm going.
You just didn't put any gel in it the other day. You'd full afro.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm going to go full on Chris Waddle at some stage. It was impressive. He was a heck of a player.
Yeah,
Spurs should really have won something around then. Now, I know they were going up against a great Liverpool side, but for the season when they had Lineker, Gaza, and Waddle, they probably should have done something.
They didn't have Lineker, Gaza, and Waddle.
Not have them in the. No, but sorry, Waddle wasn't even there in Italia 90. Waddle had gone to Marseille, but the previous season, Gaza's first season at the club, did they not have the three of them then?
No, because Lineker not at Barcelona? No, Lineker's gone back. Maybe you're right. Gaza.
Google away there, Ger. The live Googling with
get off the.
You're right.
There we go. Thank you for vindicating football correspondent Nathan Murphy.
Waddle is at Marseille there, so they do have Gaza and they do have Lineker.
Yeah, and your point is that they should have done more. Like, is there anything else from the game? I want to get into the aftermath. I want to get into the Dunphy stuff here. If you've got after you've got any last thoughts.
No, go for it.
So obviously,
there's the Waddle injury. Okay, I'm just getting to that now.
So talk us through. Give us your live breakdown of the Chris Waddle Stonewall penalty here.
Well, do you know what happens? It's the camera cuts to the sideline and the entire stadium is stunned because they're like, "Who's that little guy with the dark hair who's warming up?" No one recognizes. It must be Alan McLaughlin because we don't know who it is. And then it's just before that the Waddle thing happens. I've rewound it too long here, so I'll tell you in a second. Mars Setter's looking dapper in his suit on the bench, in a long line of very important assistant managers in Ireland. We didn't realise it, but this was the start of it. After him, there's Taff, Roy Keane, Robbie Kent. Oh, he picks it up on his own. He picks it up on his own half and does the Waddle thing. He does the Waddle thing that Kev tried to mimic, but oh wow, Waddle, what a player! This is amazing. He just falls over himself. Feck off.
No, it's a foul.
That's a dive.
We got away with it.
Nailed on.
I don't say, just on Setters, like, he has the longest conversation ever with Alan McLaughlin before he comes on. He's talking to him for a good 6 or 7 minutes, and it keeps panning to him. So he's obviously the Alan McLaughlin whisperer. If we were wondering for how Alan McLaughlin, how he was fetishized in that Ireland team, obviously Setters had something to do with it. So that's the answer to that question.
The referee's telling Chris Waddle, "Get up. Nothing wrong with you there." I can't hear Larry McMenemy giving out about how his Geordie boy has been taken down, but it looks to me like he's just twisted his ankle. He's overthought it there, but that's a good run. That is a good run. Gaza's run in the second half, after the goal he scored, is in a shorter space of time and is more taut and dynamic. And there's a Stonewall penalty in that one where Big Mick comes out and just. So they could definitely have won a fair result, I think we'd say.
Absolutely, and I would say that we were elated with that, and rightly so. But it was obviously a few days later, once we rock up to Egypt and don't exactly get the job done. That's when things start to go a little bit sour in the television studio. And then it's the game after that, obviously, when it comes to the third game of the group, when Billow has to actually apologise for Eamon Dunphy's behaviour in the previous game. In the interim period, Eamon Dunphy is after getting on a plane to Italy. So we'll play the audio from the Netherlands game.
Ever since our studio analysis of Sunday's game, there's been a lot of comment on what was said by our panellist Eamon Dunphy, whom, as you know, is in Sicily now. And only yesterday we saw Jack Charlton saying he would not talk to someone who had said he was not proud to be Irish. We can only surmise that Jack was told that Eamon had said this. It is not true, of course. Eamon did not say that. We'll show you in a moment just exactly what he did say. But before we do, let me say that we want this controversy to come to an end so that we can all concentrate on the team and on supporting them in the World Cup. So, what did Eamon really say? Here it is. Eamon.
I felt embarrassed for soccer, embarrassed for the country, embarrassed for all the good players, for our great tradition in soccer. This has nothing to do with the players who played today. That's a good side. I feel embarrassed and ashamed of that performance.
Would you go as strongly as that about it?
John never goes as strongly as me on anything, but I'm thinking of men like him, Tommy Eglinton, all the great players we produced, Peter Farrell's, the great football, the Liam Brady's, the Ronnie Whelans, the David O'Leary's. This is a great football, and country produced players and go out and play that rubbish. Yeah.
You don't even need to see that. That is the guttural expression of throwing a pen across the studio.
I love the gravitas of Billo. Like, he's talking there like Miriam coming on in prime time on the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, updating the death toll. That we've all had a bit of fun. We've all gone with the Alpha's been delayed, but now things have got really serious. This is my address to the nation. Eamon has done something bad. I'm just going to speak slowly. Was Jack right?
Or, hang on, Eamon's produced some gold, right? How can we gratuitously replay that again to get everybody who's watching to tune in for our pre-match analysis? How do we rile everybody right back up? Well, some people have said that he said he was ashamed to be Irish. What did he say? What did he say? Here we go. Play the hits, baby.
It's the first time I had really stumbled upon pure showbiz in sports broadcasting. I was like, wow, this is a really, really important vehicle for actually getting the nation talking.
And they're all in on it. Like, Gilesy doesn't turn and go, hold on a second there, Eamon, don't bring me into this. Don't bring me into this. You're on your own. It's like, no, I'll let him go. This is going to be good for business.
They're all about in on it. And then, as I say, Dunphy goes to Italy. And we have this amazing footage online of Dunphy in conversation with Jack Charlton, or really actually Jack Charlton talking about Eamon Dunphy. The audio quality here at the start is going to sound a bit bad. What it actually is just an actual dictaphone playing its audio at the start, but then you'll hear the voices of Jack Charlton and Eamon Dunphy.
I said that the style of play didn't reflect the qualities of the players in the side, and that it was embarrassing and shameful that an Irish team with players like Ronnie Whelan and David O'Leary and Paul McGrath should be playing in this style, and that finally against Egypt it was revealed to be bankrupt. I've been one of his biggest supporters. You have? Because I believe in pragmatism, and the guys who I wrote a piece for the Sunday Times a few weeks ago, which was almost an apologia for him.
I didn't stop him sit and listen to the questions that were being asked. I just wouldn't answer a question from him.
Can you comment why that is so?
Well, I don't like him. And I don't have to work with people I don't like. I think he's a bitter little man.
I've been a journalist for 12 years. I've written best-selling book. New York Times best-selling book.
This is my favourite beef in the history of Irish football. It's the most unintentionally funny rivalry that there is. Like, I'm not sure could you make it on the dictaphone audio there. I work for the Sunday Independent, 900,000 readers. Like, all he was missing was the word baby at the end of that sentence.
Yeah. At that stage, I stayed alive for 48 years, baby. He didn't quite have the showbiz. He had the arrogance. He didn't quite have the showbiz at that stage. You would even you would never get a manager being quite that honest now. I don't like him. Simple as that.
To use this classic question, who won the argument, Eamon Dunphy or Jack Charlton?
It's a good question, right?
Is it still going?
Yeah, because you both think that the Ireland team could have played better football, and that, and so Gilesy must have been making exactly the same argument sitting right beside him. It's just that it has become associated with Dunphy because that's the gift of the showman, is to become the centre of the story and the centre of the argument. But in fairness, he did beat the drum for a long period of time. And who won the argument? We've never got close to a World Cup quarter-final except when, well, I don't know, we could have gone through on penalties against Spain, right? So maybe that's not true. But since then, we've been once in our lives. Well, that was Big Mick's fault. We all know that. Didn't practice penalties, didn't notice how Belda had a twist of testicles, Spain were down to 10 men. And anyway, sent our best player home. Do we mention he sent our best player home before the World Cup? That was great management. Great bloody management. I think it's a draw. I would actually say in stereotypical Irish fashion, it's a 1-1 draw. Jack Charlton, parts of his management career were brilliant. Parts of his management career, probably a paucity of ambition limited what he thought we were capable of doing. In the greatest tradition of Irish management, we never really think that we're good enough to go out and do a bit more than we are. But he certainly managed to get us playing front foot football, and that really worked for our character. And maybe because most of those players who you say are all in the greatest teams of the Premier League era or John Giles has seen, like, none of them played in winning Ireland teams. None of them had that experience when they came to Ireland. It was a bit ramshackle. There were selection committees. There was favoritism. The hotels were rubbish. All of that stuff that actually Charlton manages to get over that, unify the team, give them an identity. And, like, again, the first person through the gap is the one who gets the credit. So he definitely wins that part of it. But, like, Dunphy was also correct. Like, we could have done a little bit better. That's the truth.
Nathan?
In a way, like, put him under pressure, and that intensity has been a defining characteristic of all brilliant football down through the years, particularly in recent years. Like, even Barcelona tiki-taka, it's press high up the pitch. Liverpool in recent seasons, suffocate the opposition inside their own half. Don't let them out. It was what happened when the ball came back and when they did that, and they did the hard part and they put them under the pressure, and they had that bit of time that again and again Mick McCarthy and Kevin Moore and Steve Staunton had in a back four that day. They could have actually done and picked out better passes, had a completely different style of play when in possession. But I think part of what he was thinking was certainly the right way. Like, Dunphy, in a way, you'd have to say both of them probably won because Jack is so revered. But, like, if Dunphy hadn't stood up that day and gone on that rant, would we look at Irish football the way we do today, where we're never happy, where we constantly, maybe more than any other, it feels more than any other footballing nation. I don't see they have this conversation in Scotland or in Wales around style, that it's not just about results, that somehow even the victories aren't enough for us, that we want something bigger, something greater, something better, something out of John Giles' eye of a beautiful style of football that we feel we've rarely, if ever, touched over the last 30, 40 years, despite the quality of players, that he allowed us through that rant to be constantly questioning of what we've seen, which is a good thing, because we don't just sit there and go, whatever served up, we'll take it. People are prepared to go, I won't say out on a limb for Wes Hoolahan, but people are prepared to be passionate about Wes Hoolahan and even look back in the Martin O'Neill era and the Trapattoni era, as well as they did at times, and say they made these massive mistakes, instead of just moving on going, well, listen, that was fine, we got good results, you know, we're a little nation, the corner of Europe, we've only got 4 million people, what more can we expect? That actually standing up and asking the question at that time, when it was so unpopular, allowed us all then, for 30 years on, to make a career out of just ranting and raving as well.
Everyone's a winner, baby.
Ill-informed, ranting and raving.
It is interesting, right, when other journalists come over to cover Ireland and from other countries, and they're like, you guys are so negative. What's with all the negativity around your team? And it's not just with the football team. Quite often it's with the rugby team as well. People are often asking, why are you so negative about the team? Maybe it is a legacy of 900,000 copies and that exact audio we heard from Eamon Dunphy, baby. Final question, underrated, overrated, what are you going for as a classic game, England against Ireland's Italia 90?
Look, I think it's a historical artifact, and to be rating history is like, was World War I or World War II, were they good wars or bad wars? How would you rate them? That's,
World War II is by far like as in terms of archive footage,
superior.
Yeah, without question,
far superior war. Right. I'm saying that this is an underrated moment in our history, and actually, I think you guys all think the game is completely unwatchable, and I disagree with that. So I'm saying it's underrated. I'm saying that you guys have. The Dunphy poison, toxicity of that rant has infested you all with this kind of inability to just sit and enjoy this moment where it's a World Cup. That's the first game we ever played in World Cup history, and the tension is unbearable. And we dig it out against England, our biggest ever rivals.
And their best player.
They were patronising us in the commentary.
And one of their best players shat his pants.
Yeah, literally. It's amazing. 10 out of 10.
it's a real story of hope what Gary Lineker's got on to achieve in his career since then, to become probably the most highly paid, biggest star in British television after having that in your pants is quite the achievement. Listen, this is the classic game club, and Vinnie Perth was on that Ireland-Italy game, and we were making the same point that we're going back and we're analysing in modern terms Paul McGrath's performance a quarter of a century on and trying to pick holes in things. This was about the moment. This was about the occasion. The performance was secondary. Game conditions are not, considering the quality of some of the players on the pitch, was atrocious. I know at the moment there's and this game is being shown on TG Car on Friday night. Let's show every game from Italia 90. No, let's not show every game from Italia 90. It's fine on a Friday night. It's perfectly fine to sit down on Friday night and watch this. Couple of glasses of wine, get nostalgic. I presume they're not going to have Laurie McMenemy mocking the entire nation. That there'll be something.
I hope they do.
A little bit warmer.
I hope they do. We'll all be like, yeah, give us the 6 counties.
Unfortunately, I watched it at midday without any wine or without anything to just ease the pain and make my life more interesting. This was the longest 2 hours of lockdown so far.
Yeah, and it was only 1 hour and 38 minutes. I'm with you, Nathan. It's overrated as a game. As a moment, it's underrated. As a punditry moment, it is vastly underrated. I think it actually might be Eamon Dunphy's finest moment if you take into account the second piece of audio we played there, not just the studio with the two boys. That is it. That is England against Republic of Ireland, Italia 90. As Nathan said, it's on TG Car this Friday. A lot of Italia 90s on TG Car over the next couple of weeks. Probably not going to do any more classic game clubs. So do tweet us at Off The Ball. What's your suggestion? What do you want us to watch back? Chat to you next time.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.